What is up, RotoGrinders? The start of 3.5 hours of nonstop NFL DFS conversation starts right now. Week number 13, lucky number 13. It is the People's Show. 2/3 of the People's Show. TJ Zwarych, one of the greatest DFS players in all of Saskatchewan, Canada. Of course, he is an honorary member of the People's Show today. Tim had the fish. If he's out there watching, Tim, feel better. Bobby Gomes, OG member of the People's Show. Former $1 million winner Bobby Gomes is here as well. Just a 10-gamer on DK, 11-gamer on FanDuel. No buys this week, but of course we had all the Thanksgiving games. We had a Black Friday game, the night game. It's being hyped up as a Snowmageddon, but Ross says probably not. Well, Buffalo tonight taking on San Fran. Of course, that's FanDuel only. 10-game main slate on DK. Again, 11-gamer on FanDuel, including the San Fran Buffalo game. Biggest total on the board, Philadelphia, Baltimore. Should be a lot of fun from a DFS perspective. Well, it might be frustrating because good luck trying to pay for the players in that game because salary is a thing. We do live in the world of a salary cap, and it's kind of sort of somewhat tight again, and the players you want are pretty pricey. So we'll discuss that amongst other things. Bobby, happy Sunday. Welcome.
Yeah, happy Sunday, guys. Ready to talk some NFL DFS. Yeah, my biggest thing on the slate is I don't know what to do with Kamara and Taysom Hill. I feel like they're popping significantly. And yeah, New Orleans doesn't have a lot in their offense, but I feel like this has been an issue for me for 3 weeks is how I play this chalk. And I think I'm going to be under on Kamara this week. And was wondering what your takes would be on that.
Well, that is the second most popular game on the board as far as total that I'm seeing right now, at least as the totals I wrote a couple of days ago. If it changed, so be it, but probably incrementally. Yeah, Saints at home versus the Rams. This time of year, being in a dome is important. Saints at home in the dome versus the Rams. Atlanta at home versus the Chargers. The Chargers are playing kind of a short week and also traveling West Coast to East Coast, but Chargers look pretty decent as well in Atlanta. I think that's also one of the faster paced games according to Derek Carty. And we do have resident Saints fan, multitasker, TJ Zwarych. So I guess that's going to be one of the conversations for the slate is, could you play both? And I used to think you could, and I'm not saying you can't, but it was much easier when the prices were cheaper. But now that Taysom's kind of baked up as far as the price, and rightfully so, because probably you can make the argument that no tight end has a bigger ceiling than Taysom. McBride probably a better floor, I guess, right? One day he's going to get in the end zone. Is it today? I don't know. But, TJ, we'll address that. If you want to touch on that now, by all means. But otherwise, how are things? Welcome.
Doing pretty well. Ready to dive into the slate. I think it's a pretty fun one regarding Kamara and Taysom. I think you probably want one of Taysom, Kamara, or the Rams defense in every lineup you play today. That's kind of how I'm going about things. I like Taysom more than Kamara just because there's more cheaper running backs I'm looking to get to this week, and so Kamara is the odd one out for me a little bit. But I do think it's okay to play them together in specific lineups. Although I do think you could play them without Rams and just kind of assume the Saints take it to them, but I don't think that's going to happen today. So the lineups I'm playing them together are the lineups that I'm stacking up Stafford. Where the other side of that game, Stafford to Kupp and Nakua, that's probably my favorite stack on the board.
Yeah, we'll kind of dig into it. But what's interesting about that game is exactly where, right, everything's going on both sides of that game. Both sides. For the Saints, you know who's going to get – if this game breaks out, right, you know it's probably Kamara and Hill. And if the Rams put up 35 or so, you know it's some combination of Nakua, Williams, and Kupp. So, yeah, it's one of the more appealing games. I don't have sometimes I come into this show and I say, this is my plan. This is what I'm doing for sure, 100%. My main lineup's going to have this. I don't have that. I have routes. It's okay, I can do this. I can do that. That's fine. Sure. Choose your own adventure. No adventure is perfect. That's kind of the way I see it. TJ, do you have do you see this slate with blinders on? You know exactly what you want? Or I'm using this show to kind of figure it out because I have ideas and I have thoughts, but I haven't exactly honed in. I don't really love this slate. we're all playing with the same pieces. You're probably going to play at least one player in your team that you don't necessarily love. I can't believe that David Moore, who we've not seen play a significant game of football since last week, like in 5 years, who's like shockingly not even 30. He's 29. I can't believe like he's somebody that's hitting lineups, but that's kind of the world we're living in. More so on DK, should point that out. But TJ, are you? This is like you love a certain thing and that's that, or you kind of figuring out like I am?
I'm still kind of figuring out. I mean, I haven't figured out I don't know if let me rephrase this. I have my lineups built. I don't know that I haven't figured out, but I have the lineups that I'm going with built. I feel pretty decent about the slate. I have a set of running backs and receivers that I really like, and so I'm playing 2 different single entry lineups and then a 20 entry max. And so I'm differentiating with my stacks, but I do have a core of players that I really like today and are basically in all of my lineups. It's going to be similar to last week. Like last week didn't go well for me because I had a lot of Brian Robinson and he went out in the first half, but I had a core of players that I loaded up on and then I differentiated throughout the stacks. And so if the core does well, it's going to be a really good day. If they don't, well, we're moving on to showdown into next week.
Is this week a little bit different? You mentioned a couple main single entry lineups and then some 20 entry max. I feel like you typically run 150. You changing things up, or am I hearing you differently?
No, for NFL, I typically just do 20. I'll do 150 for MLB. I'll do 150 for NBA. I find it tougher to do for NFL to get out what I want, and so I did it for the Thanksgiving slate just because it was a $5 milli maker. I thought it'd be fun. Wasn't that fun, but all the chalk hit,
all the
chalk hit, and then I had one Detroit running back in every lineup, and they just didn't run the ball in the second half. And so I did 150 for that just because it was a cheap milli maker, but I usually run 20 entry max and all the cheap stuff, and then I'll throw those 20 lineups in the milli maker as well, and then through 2 single entry lineups on top of it because one, I have a little bit of PTSD from the chalk hitting. So one of those lineups is Herbert and McConkey, and it's just like a super small field straight chalk lineup. And then the other one is where I differentiate and make sure I get my Stafford stack in there. Shout out to Maria Donyeezy in the chat. Flo's asking how my neck is. Neck is so much better today. I got movement on both sides. Been doing a ton of stretching, some heat pads, some muscle relaxants, and finally today feeling a lot better. So thank you for asking. Doing well.
I want to be clear. I want the points. I want people to know I'm like not a big jerk behind the scenes. I did ask you off air.
You did. You're a great guy as well.
Bobby didn't ask anything. He had no concern.
Total jerk.
I get a stiff neck here and there, push through it. You push through it.
Bobby, how do you see the slate? Are you kind of honed in? Are you still kind of figuring out? A lot of times you have your quarterback player pool at this point. What are we running? Standard stuff? Like are we running 150? Are we running like just like 10 or 15, like higher entry buy-ins?
I'm putting 10 in the big milli. Last week I was like probably the favorite to win it, and I ran as poor as you could possibly run with that McLaurin touchdown, and then I played a 2v2 off. I should have just played like the chalk, which I asked you in our group chat. What
I didn't answer because I didn't want to be wrong.
You didn't answer. Yeah, you got scared.
Nobody from the people show may have answered. I didn't answer.
That person was correct. Tim was correct. I should have played what Tim said. But it wouldn't have mattered. I think it would have finished in 5th. But yeah, I don't know. In terms of the slate, like I think I'm going to be significantly backloaded. I'm trying to get to that dome game. I'm trying to get to the Baltimore Philly game. Like you said, not a ton of value. Value is it's very difficult to build teams in that game. I feel like if people are building stacks for that game, they're probably going to Goddard on the Philly side and Lamar up top. And then obviously Zay Flowers. Like the Tampa Bay and Carolina game, like Tampa Bay side, throw up in my mouth about Carolina, but what are you going to do? But yeah, I feel like I'm just going to be more backloaded. I'll definitely have a lot of exposure to the 4:00 games. I do think there are some interesting early games. TJ talked about the Chargers. I think Cincy and the Bengals are an interesting game stack. I'm probably playing both quarterbacks in that game, and running stacks each way. The one situation that kind of scares me is Anthony Richardson. I think he's going to be relatively chalky, and his pass catchers look good. They're cheap. Can you play them together? I don't think so, but because they're cheap, you should be able to. We are start for value. I just don't think he can carry 2 receivers. That's pretty much my thought process. But I do think one's going to hit. So who's that going to be? Is it going to be Pittman? Is it going to be A.D. Mitchell? Is it going to be Alec Pierce? You got to figure that one out. I think the Seahawks and Jets game is interesting. I don't mind Geno to Metcalf, Geno to Jackson, Smith and Jigba. Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm targeting. CJ Stroud and Nico Collins in the Jacksonville game look good. So those are pretty much, that's where I'm going currently.
Yeah, Stroud feels like a good spot there, but like he's similar to Mahomes. Like he just hasn't been, fantasy wise, he just has not been useful for a while. It seems like. Pierce expected to play. You mentioned his name. He's most likely to give it a go. I don't know if we for sure, but obviously we get actives at 11:30. But he's expected to go. Devontae Smith for Philly. Speaking of that Philadelphia game, probably not. They said they're trying. They're going to maybe try to make it work, but that's a 4:00 game, so we won't know until the middle of the day probably. But seems unlikely. I know Breece Hall was dinged throughout the week, but he's expected to play for the Jets. We're expecting Brock Purdy tonight. Trevor Lawrence should be back tonight as well. Just some players that we are monitoring as far as who's in, who's out. You mentioned Geno revenge. I threw it out there the other week or so on the Pick Six show. It's like, what if Geno never left New York? It's a different story. Like, would he have been good there 5 years ago?
That's the thing. Like, is it? Because I think at a certain point you have to look at the organization and go, they have a quarterback development problem, and like we're probably going to see Zach Wilson pop up somewhere in 3 years and look good. I think at some point you got to look that it's not the players that they have there, and it's the team around them. Outside of the case right now, I'm blaming Aaron Rodgers for this.
I think they have a lot of issues in New York. Nothing
Bill Belichick can fix.
I thought he was going to Jacksonville. How many teams is he coaching for next season?
He's coaching Jacksonville now.
People float
the Giants. I think he could go back to the Giants.
He started there as like a defensive coach, right? Before the Patriots, I think. Or maybe was that before Cleveland?
I don't think he'd go to the Jets. A lot of bad blood.
Yeah. Is he for sure coming back though? Is that what's going to happen to his 19 podcasts?
I don't know. I don't know if he has the personality for radio,
I think
you're worried about his 19 podcasts. His poor 19-year-old girlfriend is going to have less time with him.
Oh, come on. I think she's older than 19. I haven't confirmed. But
26. Good for him. Good for him.
Come on, TJ. Put some respect on that. Richie's saying the Bears. Yeah, why not the Bears? The Bears.
I don't know that Belichick has the juice to be coaching in 2025.
That's the other point. Yeah, I don't know if I want. I generally don't like retreads. I'm not going to call Belichick a retread. I generally don't like the retreads. Like, this guy sucked from 4 different places, but he's got experience sucking. Give me the young guy. Give me the young person that has never been given a shot before. And retreads to me are just the worst. And all right, we should talk about quarterbacks. Anything else specific to the slate as an overview, TJ? Do you want to get out there? I think Bobby hit on something that was pretty interesting because 3 of the most interesting games on the slate, I do agree, are at 4:00, right? Tampa, Carolina, Philly, Baltimore. Again, tough to get to, but interesting. And then Rams, New Orleans. I like all 3 of those games. And the other thing I'll throw before I throw it to you is I'm looking at the ownership stuff for Philadelphia, Baltimore. This stuff can change, but where we are right now, as of 9:00 in the morning, Jalen Hurts 5% on DK, Lamar 4%. Barkley 5%, AJ Brown 6%. He might get bumped up a little bit if Smith gets ruled out, but you got to pay for him. Derrick Henry 6%, Flowers 9%, Goddard, as Bobby said, the most popular skill position player at 13%, mostly because salary is easier to swallow. And the point is it's going to go unowned, and I think that's the way it's going to hold because it's just tough to make it work as far as the skill position players. Thoughts on that and just anything else overview-wise you want to hit on before we go to quarterback?
No, I think that's about it. I'm pretty firm on I think you want to play Kamara or Taysom in most of your lineups today. But other than that, that's it for kind of like firm rules I'm setting going into it. I'm going to be underweight on that. We'll get to it, but I'm going to be underweight on that Baltimore and Philadelphia game. It is scary, but like essentially all the production has to go to one of these expensive options if they're going to be putting up a ceiling performance and beating us, which could happen. We've seen Saquon do it. We've seen AJ do it. We've seen Hurts and Lamar do it on their legs. We've seen Henry do it. So it's certainly possible, but I'm going to be underweight on that one today.
Did not officially say hello to chat. What's up, chat? Hit that like button, do subscribe, and turn on those notifications. Hit everything, hit all the buttons. I did drop the weather report earlier. If you guys want to read it again, read it at your own leisure. Roth officially has San Fran Buffalo at yellow orange. It's a long paragraph. They do have as they typically do this time of year, they get some volunteers. I shouldn't say volunteers. They get paid to plow the field, but he's not expecting it to be the complete snowmageddon. But possibly some winds. They're talking about some gusts, maybe 2025. We'll see. It's still 10 hours out. Roth reserves the right to change his mind because weather is fluid and things can change as we close in on lock for that game. Of course, that game just on FanDuel, not on DK. Also, we did drop the Listener League. I know I saw TJ, you drop it as well, but somebody was asking for it. The Listener League contest, jump in there. It doesn't cost you a thing. It's totally free. It's on DraftKings. $0 entry fee. If you happen to take it down, like myself, a lot of the RG personalities are playing in there as well. If you're playing on DraftKings, just throw your lineup in there. Throw one of your lineups in there. And if you happen to win, if you happen to bink it, you get yourself a month free of RotoGrinders Premium. So do go ahead and throw your spots are limited too, I think, to 200. So make sure you get in there before that does close out. TJ, we're good to go.
Yeah, I admit I got a joke in chat. Brandon Wilcox usually doesn't get me with his comments, but that one was pretty good. Weather is only fluid if it's raining, so that one made me laugh.
Well, what sleet is not fluid? There's some sort of fluid there, right? I think.
Yeah, I don't know, some mixture of solid fluid, but either way, I thought it was kind of funny.
Snow? Yeah, I don't want to get all technical and Brandon there in chat, but
I think snow's solid.
Yeah. What is the snow mix? Snow flurries? Is that kind of a combination platter? I don't. I'm from Florida. I'm not the guy. You're TJ. You can walk outside your house, I assume, and find some snow. I'm guessing, maybe, possibly.
Yeah, snow is considered a solid. I'm right. I second guess myself there for a second, but
we gotta get Bill Nye in here or something. Bobby, they're requesting you need a coffee. Have you had your coffee yet today?
No coffee, Red Bull.
Get my guy Dunkies.
I don't have I have Dunks outside. Yeah, no coffee though.
You ordered Dunkin', but no coffee?
I ordered it and I didn't get a Dunkin'. I gave my girlfriend instructions to get me a coffee, and she went down the street. If I had drank that coffee, boys, I wouldn't be able to sit through this show. So I chose the Red Bull.
You chose wisely. All right, TJ. Well, let's set the table as far as quarterbacks. You're probably, I shouldn't say that. Some of the more popular options at quarterback today are some of the salary savers just because of salary cap constraints. As things are right now, pretty big favorite here as far as the chalk is Justin Herbert at 19% on DK 5.6. You mentioned somebody mentioned Richardson at 14%. Darnold, I know the Blitz really likes Darnold. I know Cardi was talking about him a good bit on the Blitz show at 7%. Stafford at 7%. Yeah, I mean, it feels like 303 are on layaway. Daniels at 6, but yeah, some of the best quarterbacks are not going to get heavily owned. If there is a cheapie, I guess it's Bryce Young, who's been better of late. He's got really cheap partners as well, as if you want to pair him with some cheap receivers. He's coming in at 4%. But yeah, TJ, is your pool settled? You still kind of figuring it out? What do you got as far as quarterback?
My pool is settled. I think the cash game play is Justin Herbert. I think Richardson is fine, but I would rather go Herbert in that scenario. And I have him in one of my single entry style lineups. I'm getting to one Lamar, one Jalen Hurts. I really like Matt Stafford. He's going to be my highest owned. Darnold is fine. I'm getting some Baker Mayfield at low ownership in tournaments. I have one Will Levis lineup, one Derek Carr lineup. But I think Butthole Jenkins makes a great call in chat. I'm playing Trevor Lawrence tonight. I have Trevor Lawrence in 2 of my 20 lineups, and I think he's going to go totally under the radar. First game back from injury. I do like this game in general, and I think Houston's going to take it to them. But I think Mixon's going to be heavily involved, and so I'd rather just play Mixon and Collins than Stroud. But if I'm playing both of them, I kind of want to run it back with that Jaguars offense. And so a Lawrence stack with Brian Thomas and Evan Ingram, running it back with some Nico Collins and Joe Mixon. I think that's a super high upside way to get contrarian today.
Was that his throwing shoulder? Do we know? Left shoulder. So is he a lefty or a righty? Do we know about Lawrence?
Righty.
That's what I figured. That's likelihood. 11% of the world is lefty, so chances are it's he's going to be righty. But assuming he's fine, because I thought there was a chance that Lawrence would just get shut down a couple weeks ago, and like that also probably bleeds into the fact that their team's going nowhere. But yeah, he's back and he's really cheap. I don't think that's bonkers. I don't think that's completely bonkers. I don't mind it for tournaments. Like you said, the pairings are pretty good. Thomas and Ingram. See that quarterback player pool, Bobby. Feel free to critique it. Are you overlapping? Is there a Venn diagram? Is there anybody you both have in the pool?
I love the CJ Stroud and Trevor Lawrence call. Like, I like that game from a tournament perspective. I like stacks of both Lawrence and CJ Stroud. Jalen Hurts is going to be low owned in that Philly-Baltimore game. I have interest in that. Like, you're getting combinatorial ownership of that stack won't be high at all. Just because
you've been on Blender show lately. That's a Blender word.
That is like a DFS elitist word. I will say that.
What are you saying on Blender?
Like a normal person. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I like Hurts. I also like Lamar in that game. Not calling Blender or DFS elitist either, but I feel like the majority of the people that use that term are.
Oh, he kind of is. He kind of is. He's very much of a snob. Like, yeah, you've got to win the right way.
Yeah.
Well, you won, but let me see the lineup. I guess I approve. But you're pushing things there. You didn't fully stack.
I just wanted to be friendly. I do a show with him, so I didn't want to. I wasn't taking a shot. If people were thinking that. I like the Baker call. I have issues with Bryce Young and like who you're running that back with, because I just can't bring myself to play Panthers at this point. But I do think it's a good spot for that offense. So there should be someone that sticks out a little bit. I would imagine. Nope. Doesn't seem like it.
You're talking about
David Moore. Yeah, David Moore. Great. They're 29-year-old David Moore. 5 years ago, he was good and not good, but like the third receiver for the Seahawks. I guess Chuba's there. You could play some Chuba maybe. That other running back, Jonathan Brooks, should be in play though as well, right? Well, not actually play, but he's there.
He's
right?
there, but they're not giving him anything.
They're not playing him.
It might come out of nowhere, but the expectations are it's very, very clearly Chuba's backfield.
Yeah, that's good to know, because so I could definitely Chuba might be the guy you can run it back with. In terms of like the chalk QBs, I have issue with Herbert. I don't like Richardson. If I had to choose between the two, I think TJ is right. It is Herbert. I would much prefer like playing Herbert in cash. Stafford is the one I'm going to be over on. It's just like you guys said at the top of the show, it's so condensed. Like both sides is so condensed. Demarcus Robinson at 4K, I think, is a sneaky pair with Stafford if you wanted to go there. Who else am I looking at? I feel like that's mainly it. Joe Burrow. I'm gonna have a lot of Joe Burrow in Cincy stacks.
Your favorite pairing with Burrow? I mean, Higgins.
My favorite play with Burrow would be Chase, not T. Higgins. I think the field's going to play T. Higgins, and I'm going to find a way to get a Chase.
I know we're not on receivers, but like the David Moore thing came up again, and like it is wild. Like before this season, he's not caught a pass in the NFL since I think 2019, 2020. He wasn't in the NFL in 2022, 2023. don't know if he was XFL or what he was doing, but USFL, he was hanging out there with TJ in Canada. I'm not sure what he was up to. It's bonkers that he's going to be somewhat popular today. I kind of get it, but it is pretty wild that this, injuries have opened some stuff up, and he's probably going to be, on the field for most plays. Still kind of trying to figure that out and get over that. You're talking about running backs. We'll get to Bijan when we get to them soon enough. But yeah, the other quarterbacks that are worth talking about here. TJ, you said you're running single entry stuff. You know your single entry quarterbacks? That's more important, isn't it?
Yeah, one's Herbert, one's Stafford.
So kind of the chalky ones.
Yeah, I just love the Stafford, Puka, Cup, Taysom Hill stack and run back is my favorite on the slate.
A double? Is that a Stafford double? You get the salary for that?
Yeah. I wouldn't want to play a Stafford single. I would rather just play the receiver on their own and play somebody like Anthony Richardson at that and hope for the rushing upside. I think for Stafford to be optimal, it has to be a double stack.
Interesting. All right. Do you agree with that, Bobby?
I do agree with that. I'm always doubling Stafford.
I mean, unless he's throwing 4 touchdown passes to Puka Nacua, I'm gonna want the double stack.
Well, the other part of that is that he has no legs, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, if he's going to get there, it's got to be 303, something to that effect. And he probably splits it amongst the 2 main guys is the thought process.
I exclusively double stack with non-running quarterbacks, like double or triple every time. I don't run single stacks unless it's a cash game or a running quarterback.
I have my unwritten, my rules, my general rules, and I don't like quarterbacks that can't really move that are going to be kind of popular. So, I mean,
I agree with that too. But
I'll break them sometimes. But those are general rules, right? I don't know if today's the day to break them or not. But
perfect example is Herbert. Herbert has been showing more rushing upside recently, anyways, but not typically a running quarterback. He's going to be 20% owned today. I don't want to play Herbert with just McConkey. I want to be double stacking him every single tournament lineup I'm playing him. So my main Herbert single entry and in smaller field, I'm not worried about getting too different. It's Herbert and Disley. And I'm going 2 tight end in that one because I have Taysom too, running it back with Puka. But then for my other Herbert lineups and larger field stuff, I'm playing a lot of Quentin Johnson there. It feels terrible. It feels absolutely terrible. But how do you win with how do you win with Herbert when he's 20% owned? You play him with his receiver that nobody wants to play because he looked horrific last week.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody's seen the clips by now. Quentin Johnson, just struggling to catch the football, and it's not it's kind of like his label now, right? Just not a great pass catcher necessarily, but nobody
in front of a jug machine for hours on end. Just stand there and don't.
Does he have smaller hands? I don't know what the hand situation is with Johnston, but yeah, that's just sort of his label, right? And he said he has issues catching the football sometimes.
How do you make it to the NFL and you can't catch? And you're as a wide receiver and
he's fast.
You still have to be able to catch.
I don't know what his.
I don't want to go there, but if you put me in front of the jug machine, I'm going to catch more than Quentin Johnson.
I think you did want to go there. You did.
Yeah, I did.
I dropped one pass in my high school football career, and it was up top over my head in pouring rain in a game we were winning by 28. So I didn't feel bad about it.
There was fluid coming down on you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, a lot of fluid in the air, and it's rare to get a rain game here in Saskatchewan because usually it's beautiful weather until it gets cold. Then we get the snow games.
I didn't even know you guys had football in Canada.
You've never heard of the CFL?
No, it's not real football. See, they have different rules, right?
I'd be willing to bet, Bobby. Here, my prediction is that your highest owned player today is Canadian.
Who is it?
Who's your highest owned player?
I'm trying to think who's Canadian.
Who's Canadian? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to. Chase Brown is currently my highest owned player. He's Canadian.
Your highest owned player is Canadian.
Well, I don't know who
Chase
it
Brown,
is.
Canadian, Dean. You don't have to keep guessing it. He said it. It's the highest owned player.
Chase Brown? I didn't hear him. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Warren Moon was like crushed the CFL before he came to the NFL. And he had bunch of records. Marcus Allen's brother is like the greatest quarterback all time in the CFL.
No.
One of them.
Warren Moon is the best QB to ever set foot in the
okay.
And
Doug Flutie.
Doug Flutie's up there too. Damon Allen, Marcus Allen's brother, he had some records because he played for over 20 years in the CFL.
He's compiler.
He was never like the 1-1 of quarterbacks, you know, like he had some good.
He never got a shot in the NFL being Marcus Allen's brother.
Probably did. Cameron Wake was in the CFL before the NFL.
Miami. Yeah.
Ricky Williams came to the CFL and was absolutely terrible. No, he never made a team. He was just in training.
Johnny Manziel was in the CFL.
Practice though. He has a uniform picture.
Yeah, Manziel was terrible in the CFL too. But no, especially where I live, Saskatchewan is an incredibly strong football province.
The Rough Riders.
Yeah, but no, just like youth league and stuff like that. Like Saskatchewan can go toe to toe with Ontario, and Ontario is basically like the population of a state. Ontario for basketball could go toe to toe with any state in the United States.
Can you explain the 1 point in the CFL? How do you score 1 point? They punt it and like the ball gets punted into the end zone. I think you get a point. Is that what that is? It's called
touchbacks. Touchbacks are worth 1 point in the CFL.
Yeah. Okay.
Why?
To get people to not try and kick it into the end zone.
Okay.
It's like, so a touchback in the NFL, you give up a point, but you also get way better in the CFL. Sorry. You also get way better field position.
Oh, wait. Oh, if you kick it in the end zone as a touchback, the other team gets a point.
No. The kicking team gets the point. The receiving team gives up the point, but gets really good field position.
Okay. All right.
It's a dumb rule.
Okay. I was trying to think it was incentivizing, going for it in offense. And I think the field's wider too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it does incentivize going for it on offense. But the other thing is it gives like the odd time, it gives something fun where it's like, you're out of field goal range, but maybe you have a punter who can punt it through the end zone and it's a tie game. And then you get a situation where they try and punt it and they punt it into the end zone and the other team's just doing whatever they can to get it out. And it does kind of give some fun chaos. But another person just asked for the listener league contest link in the chat. I've dropped it in the chat a couple times already, but it's in the description below, right down there below us. When you're hitting the like button, when you're subscribing, when you're hitting that notification bell, just look in the description right below. The link to the listener league contest is in there.
Mitch is telling us in chat that it's called a rogue, which is now I'm in on it. That sounds
rouge.
Cool.
It's a
rouge. Oh, wow. Yeah, my French. Rouge. I thought it was rogue. Rouge sounds kind of cool too.
Yeah, that was spelled incorrectly, but yeah, it's a rouge.
Okay, so I was set up for failure on that, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
the way it was spelled there in chat. Chat, let us know. Is there any quarterbacks you want us to talk about? Because we seem to be pretty clear as far as who we like. Bobby, is there a quarterback that you're most afraid of not having, just whatever reason, salary or just ownership stuff, or just not fitting your builds? Who's the quarterback like you think is going to be good and you're just afraid, whatever reason, you're not getting to him enough?
I guess Richardson, because I'm going to be underweight on Richardson and his receivers are projecting very well. I just don't have any idea how to play him. Like, I'm just going to single up Richardson. Everyone's going to do that if they play him. No one's going to double him.
You never double Richardson, though, right? A lot of people play him naked.
My first team is actually doubling him, but I just don't really. I guess you can, because Mitchell is 3.9, right?
It's cheap. Yeah.
Cheap. I guess you can double him. Yeah, so if I did play him in tournaments, maybe I would double it. Maybe when I do play him, I'll double him, but I don't think I'm going to play him significantly. I don't think I'm going to play the single stacks of him.
TJ, same question for you. And if you guys, again, throw somebody out in chat, by all means, go for it. We'll talk about – they want us to talk about Bryce Young. TJ, you want to talk about Bryce Young? He's been better. You can say that.
I am playing Bryce Young today. It's not by choice. It's because I lost the Blitz 4-man last week, and so my assigned quarterback was Bryce Young. And so I do have one Bryce Young lineup, but I think he's somewhat viable because he's so cheap. People want to play David Moore, and my favorite sub 3K tight end option today is a Panther. It's Tommy Tremble because Jentavian Sanders is out. And so I do think you can play Bryce Young. I don't feel good about it by any means. But like a Bryce Young, Moore, Tremble stack allows you to play anybody else on the slate you want.
You say Tremble's your favorite 3K and under. Is there anybody else? I'm trying to think like who is he better than?
No.
I'm just kind of going through them because I didn't get down that low. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's anybody that could be kind of sort of somewhat interesting. Yeah, it's rough. Chat was asking about Derek Carr. I'm not trying to tilt you, TJ. I know you're not a fan of Derek Carr. It's also tricky with, Taysom always lurking, can steal touchdowns down the goal line. He can throw the ball, right? He can steal a touchdown from Kamara via the legs. I don't think I'm getting there as far as Carr. How about yourself?
I have Carr in one of my 20 lineups.
Oh.
That's it.
Who do you pair him with?
I have Carr, Kamara, Valdez-Scantling, Taysom Hill, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp.
Oh, wow. That's 6? Is that 6? Is my math correct?
6 players from that game.
Wow. There you go. The old game stack. Sure. You're dropping that. You're trying to pull a Lions, trying to make a Lions happen out of nowhere. Not exactly 7, but it is a lot for sure.
Well, and that was 7 all on, or 8. I think it was 8 all on the Lions. It was 8 Lions player in that lineup. I will never forget it because all I had to do was play St. Brown and I would have beat it by double digits.
It's a lot easier when we know the results. But yeah, you were right there. You were right there for sure. Bobby in chat, they're asking about your boy Drake May. Mr. Richard wants to know about Drake May. He's got some legs. I don't know who to pair him with. Another guy I don't know who to pair with. Henry, I guess, maybe.
It's easily Henry. I think I might end up playing him. I'm just over like the booty experience. So yeah, Henry. I guess Henry and Stevenson.
Yeah. They have the worst, whoever grades this stuff out, worst offensive line or bottom 3, they're on the podium, right? They're horrendous offensive line-wise.
They're terrible at every position except the quarterback.
Yeah. May might be okay. He might be okay.
I think May's the best, most efficient passer out of the 3 between him, Daniels, and Williams.
We're not even going to mention Locke? No, not
Knicks.
Yeah, I was thinking Denver, and I got
you could throw. I was just talking about the top 3.
Yeah.
I think you could throw Knicks. Knicks looks fantastic too. Caleb Williams. Oh man, Bears are in trouble.
I think he's going to be all right. You don't think he's going to get there? Okay.
I think he'll get there. I just don't think he should have been the number 1 overall pick.
Well, because you think other guys have risen up. Yeah, I wonder how, 13 games in, how they would have been drafted differently at this point. I guess Daniels will be the 1.
I think Caleb would be last of the 4, to be honest.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, I think
if you change Caleb in both next places right now, Caleb Williams is probably the rookie of the year.
If you put him in a different offense, or
not like that.
Put him with Sean Payton with a good offensive line, and I think he does better. He's been a much better quarterback with their offensive coordinator change the past couple games, and their offensive line has been pretty terrible. So now that he's getting rid of the ball quicker, he looks a lot better, setting all kinds of records for the most pass attempts without an interception. He's getting a lot of sacks, but their offensive line is really bad. I think maybe Jaden Daniels should go 1 in a redraft, but I think Caleb should go 2 at worst. He just hasn't really been in.
I honestly think Drake is a better thrower of the football than both of them.
I think it's just a good class. I think we can say that.
I think that too. I think
it's going to be pretty good in a few years. Like we forget, Caleb, 2 of his losses, he's at least 2 losses that are kind of goofy. The Washington loss, and then The loss is, well, I mean, just a weird game. At least playing so tight against Detroit is kind of a victory, but the way that game ended was certainly an absolute disaster, and justifiable to fire the coach. That was the old last straw. But the chat is not having it. We've got some Bears fans in the chat that are not pleased with these takes here, Bobby.
They like Caleb. They like their guy. You can't knock him.
All right. Anything else as far as Brock Bowers better than Caleb? Yeah, I mean, finding a franchise quarterback is more important than finding a tight end, but Bowers looks awesome. He's going to break the reception record. Like, I think that's assuming he stays healthy. Not even just tight end, but maybe like rookie receptions. I guess it's, you get an extra game too, which is kind of cheating. I'm not sure if he needs it or not, but that dude every single week, it's like 8 receptions plus. Okay, we shall move on from quarterbacks. Unless you guys have anything else as far as quarterbacks? I don't think so. Let's talk running backs. Bobby, you want to open up?
One more thing to hammer home is, just because in case somebody wasn't here right at the start, love Trevor Lawrence for tournaments. I think that's super sneaky.
Yeah. And you have to assume he's healthy, right? Just like, I assume it's a help. He's fine. I'm guessing he's fine or fine enough. He's going to by the way, speaking of, not to kind of go back on quarterbacks, I think there's somebody we didn't mention that is one of my favorite, actually. Did we not mention Baker Mayfield?
No, I did. I got 2 Baker lineups as well. I like Baker.
Kind of glossed over. Yeah, okay. But I feel like that's, we love offenses versus Carolina. Evans looked good last week. They didn't really need him in the second half, so I think that's the reason why most of them played the second half. Was around 55-60% snaps, something like that. But he looked good when he was out there. If you want to pair him with Bucky Irving, I don't think that's nuts, right? Just enough dump offs. But yeah, I think Mayfield is one of my favorite. And then, I like that game in general. If you're going to play David Moore, you can run it back, or a Tremble. It's just like talk about a cheap piece on the other side. But I do like the Tampa offense. They have a team total close to 27, 26.5. So definitely a team that I want to get some of is the Bucks. Okay, Bobby, we mentioned Bucky Irving, kind of a breakout game for him last week. Let's discuss other running backs as we see right now. Ownership, we're seeing Kamara 30%, the best Canadian football player in the league, Chase Brown, 30%. Everybody knows he's Canadian. Bijan Robinson, 21%. Bucky's coming in at 17%. This is DK for what it's worth. Kyren Williams, 17%. Chuba at 16%. And then everybody else, teens, not really well owned. Taylor,
who was that at 16?
Williams, Kyren Williams.
Oh, thought you said somebody else. There's a different Canadian running back you slipped in there.
I said Chuba.
There you
Bucky.
go.
Oh, is Chuba Canadian also?
Yep.
All right. Shout out to Chuba. Didn't know. Yeah. So, Kamara, Brown, Robinson, that's like the chalk, right? Those are your top 3. And then I guess Bucky's on DK more so than FanDuel. FanDuel is like 7-2. You can play in there for sure. But 5-8 on DK where, you get bonus points for those receptions. Not bonus points, but a full points, obviously. Bobby, how are we feeling about the chalk up top? Running backs just in general, what is your approach?
Yeah, if I had to rank the 3 chalk pieces, it would be Chase, it would be Bijan, and then it would be Kamara. If you throw Bucky in there, I'd throw Bucky probably ahead of Kamara and move Kamara down to 4 and Bucky up to 3. For me, I'm only playing Kamara if I'm playing a Stafford stack or a Carr stack. So I like Taysom Hill. I think there's too much negative correlation there now that the price has risen. So that's the only way I'm playing Kamara. Chase Brown's my favorite versus Pittsburgh's 6,200. I think it's a good spot for him. The games really won't go away from him either way. He's going to be in there, so I don't mind Chase Brown. Bijan Robinson, he's fine. I've had difficulty playing him, but I'm fine with it. My favorite GPP running back is Kyren Williams in the New Orleans Rams game because I think he gives leverage off Stafford in the passing game. You could also use him with Stafford. He's my favorite running back in that game. I would put him ahead of Kamara in everything. Favorite running back on the slate for that matter. Chuba Hubbard, I think, like you said, is in play. We don't know how much the backup's going to be worked in, but it's Chuba's backfield, so I'm fine going there. Interesting cheapie, Gus Edwards in the in the Chargers game, with everyone kind of gravitating to Herbert. Gus at that price tag, I think is somewhat interesting. Joe Mixon versus Jacksonville has been absolutely crushing all year, and he's another GPP running back that I'd have significant interest in. Kenneth Walker, same thing against the Jets, who just can't stop the run at this point. Aaron Jones versus Arizona, like, I want some Aaron Jones this week, even at 6,500. Maybe if you don't play Chase Brown, you want to pay the extra 300, get up to Aaron Jones, that's fine. Jonathan Taylor versus New England. The thing is, I always try to play Jonathan Taylor in these situations, and he never gets there. He's just never the guy for whatever reason. Brian Robinson versus Tennessee. I'd probably not play that. Just Tennessee. I know if you're going to beat them, you beat them on the ground, but Robinson coming off the injury and
no Eckler, by the way. Just wanted to note that, but they have other guys. They have other guys that can kind of jump in there and fill in, basically. I didn't mention that the Eckler injury. People might have missed it, but they have what, McNichols and Rodriguez, so it'll probably get worked in. So, I don't know how much of a bump that is for Robinson.
Yeah, the final two would be Saquon and Henry. Like, I'm going to try to get over on both in that Philly. It's just a matter of salary. Like, it's tough to get to them.
So remember we talked about Chuba and Jonathan Brooks. Pulled up the sports books. You want to guess what Jonathan Brooks, what his over-under is as far as rushing yards today is? This is why I said, I'm leading the witness here. This is why I said, like, don't worry about it. At least, unless nobody sees this coming, because the books don't see it coming. Is over-under, Bobby? You want to take a number? You want to take a guess for rushing yards?
6 rushing yards?
10.5.
10.5.
11.5, depending on where you're shopping. So,
yeah.
I mean, he's probably going to get 3 or 4 carries or something like that. We'll see. And they probably have some regrets, drafting a running back that high and then signing. Maybe they realized how good Chuba was going to be, or also they're going to try to reincarnate to what was that? D'Angelo Williams, and who was the other running back? The 1-2 punch as far as running backs. Maybe that'll be the plan next season. Vidal being thrown out. Yeah, Vidal's an interesting one. Nobody really wants to hype up Vidal with no Dobbins for the Chargers. Is that somebody we've considered, TJ?
I basically made the same lineup that has the same Stafford stack that has Gus Edwards in one and Vidal in one. But just in one of 20 lineups for each of them.
Curious if Vidal has a number, according to the books. If we can kind of get a guide at least. I don't see one. I don't know if he says no number for whatever reason, but yeah, it's a tricky situation because the Chargers like running the ball. Maybe they just pass it more. They've been passing more of late with the injury to Dobbins. Gus Edwards. It's funny, nobody wants to play Gus Edwards, and I kind of don't want to either. How are we handling that backfield, Bobby? The Chargers, Edwards.
I think Edwards at 4,300 is playable just because of the tag.
Yeah,
and because Herbert's chalky.
What is it's an interesting leverage move. I'm trying to see what our projections are fantasy wise. I mean, nobody really looks well, right? As far as the projection that I'm seeing, Edwards around 11 points. That's not terrible as a median projection. Vidal 6 points. Haskins basically nothing, very little. Yeah, I mean, if we're really desperate to pinch pennies, I don't think it's the worst idea. You can do goofier things, I suppose. Let's see. Oh, Jonathan Stewart. Thank you, Florida man in chat. Jonathan Stewart was the other running back there for Carolina. I pulled up the SimLabs stuff here, TJ, and interestingly enough, there's the optimal versus the projected ownership, and a lot of times it's kind of inverse of ownership, right? And the number one guy, TJ, and this will change at 7:00 in the morning. The last time they gave an update, the updates is again, as we close and unlock. But it is peculiar that Alvin Kamara is the best guy, optimal versus projected ownership, when his projected ownership is 30%. Do you find that strange? I find that strange. They're saying that they really, really, really love Kamara today, basically.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. That's why it kind of reaffirms that you want one of Kamara or Taysom Hill in every single lineup you play today.
He has to do so much, though.
Why? He's only 7,700.
It's just these other running backs are cheaper.
And
I can go down to Tyron in the same game for 72.
You mentioned Kyron. I know not to cut you off, but you mentioned Kyron. He doesn't catch the ball is the problem. And you mentioned playing him with Stafford. Is that just the idea of catching?
No. I think you can get away with playing him with Stafford, but he would be more leverage off the passing game.
Oh, okay. That's the thing is we're looking at 15 to 20 touches, almost all on the ground for Kyron. Maybe he gets up to 25. Whereas Kamara, you're looking at 15 to 20 touches. Maybe he gets up to 30 or 40, and he's getting 8, 9, 10 targets every game. Like 4 last game, but before that, 6, 9, 11, 7, 8, 8, 9. It's just he is the best floor of any of these guys, and then he's got the ceiling too if he happens to hit the end zone. Having said that, I'm playing much more Chase Brown and Bucky Irving because they're way cheaper.
That's what I'm saying. Like you'd play Chase Brown, you could play Bucky Irving. I would rather play Henry or Saquon.
I would rather play Kamara than Henry or Saquon, but I am tempted to go Mixon over Kamara. Mixon's who I really like in that range.
Kenneth Walker, Aaron Jones. I don't know. Opportunity cost at running back is pretty good.
My whole pool at running back this week. So like if you don't include Gus Edwards and Vidal, who I think I've Gus in 2 lineups, Vidal in 1. It's like people saying like that part in chat saying Vidal is going to have 1 catch for 3 yards and that's it. Yeah, probably. But if they decide to not amp up Gus Edwards' role and just give a 50-50 split to Vidal at 4K, he's probably the more electric one. And that's how you win a GPP. It's like, it's probably not going to be good, but he's going to be 0.8% owned. And if they don't do what we all think they're going to do, there's a path to success there. Now, I don't think it's going to go well, but if it does, that's where you have a big chance at a ceiling game. The only running backs like I'm excited to play today are Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Bijan Robinson. And then I also like Kyron Williams, Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones, but not as much as I like that other crew.
So the ownership thing is really interesting. And I think I heard you say this, TJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said you prefer Kamara over Barkley and Henry. And like, he's going to be like 5 times as owned as those guys. It's just, and like, he's not outscoring those guys 80% of the time. He's just not, right? I like Kamara too. But we're seeing 30% for Kamara and 5 or 6% for Barkley. I know Barkley's a little bit more. I know Henry's a little bit more, $100 more specifically. But should he be 5 times the ownership as far as those guys, more or less, if that's where our numbers land?
That's why I think he's a horrible play.
That's the argument you're making.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see both sides of it.
And then you have
alternatively,
too. Like what if Taysom,
in this game, for like in the Baltimore and Philadelphia game, if you projected, in addition to his rushing numbers, if you projected 7 to 8 targets for Derrick Henry, how many lineups would you have him in today?
More, yeah, a lot.
That's the argument for Kamara. Inversely,
you're saying
I don't really agree with that because Taysom is at the goal line. I know Lamar's at the goal line as well, but they're just a running team at the goal line. Baltimore, like they're just going to give it.
Are Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts not goal line threats too?
Yeah, that's a good point. I just think Henry's way more efficient at the goal line than Kamara.
That's true.
It's a good conversation. In the middle, Bijan at 20%, Mixon at 11%, kind of as far as similar price points. By the way, I was pulling up, again, looking at the SimLabs stuff. Kamara looks awesome. The 2 guys that look really bad, and again, a lot of times this is like inverse of ownership, and you saw this, I'm sure, TJ. You love the Canadian. Chase Brown is, according to our optimal versus projected ownership, is a bad play, as is Bucky Irving. And somebody in chat was like, yeah, why would you want to running back a part of a 3-headed monster? I don't like using that term. And it's certainly not a 3-headed monster.
I think that's a good point, though. Like, you never want to play. I know they were favored and whatever, but when you're dueling backfields, it's very difficult for them to hit ceilings. Like last week, they ran super pure because all the touchdowns are on the ground for the Bucks,
The thing is like last week still, Bucky Irving on the first drive got stopped at the 1 yard line. They give it to Tucker for a touchdown.
Yeah,
Next
that's what I'm
drive,
saying.
Bucky Irving gets stopped at the 1 yard line. Sean Tucker fumbles it. So it's like he almost had an even bigger game than he had last week. It's the Panthers. That's it. Like, that's why.
Did he see the field after that fumble? Because Tucker is the clear number 3.
Tucker really saw any work after that fumble.
He's the clear number 3, and like there's a chance he can just go to bed. Like it's a 2-man back. Like I'm not saying that it's likely, but I can absolutely see. We saw it a couple weeks ago where he didn't touch the ball.
I have one Tampa Bay onslaught lineup where I'm playing Baker Mayfield, Bucky Irving, Rashad White, and Mike Evans.
Okay, you're not playing Tucker.
No. But I'm playing Baker with both of his running backs just because he targets them so much.
I think you can.
I think there's a scenario that they drop 40 plus on Carolina.
I had a single game parlay, like 50% bonus, and I had to spend it on something, and I was trying to figure out. And I know it's like the donkeyish thing to do is to bet overs, but I have Bucky White over rushing and receiving yards, and then Chuba over, rushing and receiving. Just kind of hoping this game kind of shoots out. And I think Bucky and White can both get there. And I think Tucker, he kind of goes to bed. We barely see him today. So here's hoping that game is shooting out. Eric's asking about Breece Hall. Do we assume he's 100%? That's my one concern with him is like, obviously, the talent is there. He's one good thing in a miserable season for the Jets. A little bit concerned as far as the injury he's been nursing. I don't think we've mentioned him. Maybe just in passing. He's not really going to be owned, TJ. Breece Hall, is he in your pool?
No Breece Hall for me.
Yeah. We almost had Braylon Allen. That was almost the thing. We were talking about that or thinking about that later. On Thursday and Friday, there was a chance Hall wouldn't go. And Braylon Allen would have been, Lock City. Let's see. Anybody else as far as running backs? Oh, TJ, I did kind of mention it, but I didn't really get your response. Any concern, I guess no concern, with the optimal versus projected ownership, not liking Chase Brown, not liking Bucky, not liking Hubbard either. Again, a lot of that stuff is kind of inverse ownership sometimes.
No, it doesn't bother me. I'm still going to go heavily overweight to Chase Brown and Bucky Irving. I think they have massive ceilings in this spot. Bucky with the massive ceiling, I think Chase has the best floor on the slate. Like, I get that Chase is maybe going over owned, but Chase Brown should be 7,300 with Kyren, Bijan, and Kamara. He should not be 62 with this current role that he has. So it's just a pricing play for me. I'm going to be getting to an absolute ton of them. I like the expensive receivers on this slate. And so I'm going to be loading up on Bucky and Chase Brown and then playing a lot of the expensive receivers.
Bobby Allen wants to know about Jaylen Warren. Tyler's bringing up Pollard. Pollard's workload has been awesome of late. I feel like I've slept on it a little bit.
Spears is back this week, though.
Is he for sure back? I wasn't sure yet last night. Okay. It was a concussion? Is that what it was? I think it was, or maybe I'm wrong. Okay, so he's expected back this week. Okay. So I know he's questionable on the sites. Yeah, he had a concussion. I didn't see the update on that. But yeah, that should lessen the workload a little bit for Pollard. Yeah. Pollard, Warren, anybody we missed here, Bobby, as far as running backs?
No interest in Warren. I do have some interest in Pollard if you think that Spears is coming back and not seeing the same role, or they'll ease him back in. Probably have to wait for confirmation on that.
And we didn't really kind of hammer home the Mixon. Bobby, what was your Mixon take?
I like Mixon. One of the reasons I don't think you have to be significantly overweight to Kamara. It's another running back that I think you could play. Spending 500, 300 more, but I think Mixon's perfectly fine.
All right. TJ, you're working hard, multitasking with the bots. Did the bots go away? Now is like a no-hitter? I shouldn't mention it. Now the bots are going to come back, but I saw the bots in chat were gone, at least temporarily.
Yeah, even if I think about them, they usually come back. So I try not to mention them out loud because usually they can, as soon as my thoughts get there, they start putting in. But they've been light so far. But ideally, I get rid of them before you even get a chance to see them.
Yeah, you could just manifest them if you just think about them hard enough. I think that's it as far as running backs. If you missed somebody, by all means, fire it off. Before we talk about receivers, I do want to mention that our Thanksgiving table, I know it's not Thanksgiving anymore, but, a few days ago, has a little bit of something for everybody.
And I believe this is the last day of the big Thanksgiving sale.
Okay, good. I'm glad you clarified. Yeah, I guess that would make sense. So this week only, I don't know if we're having, like a Cyber Monday thing. I couldn't tell you. I don't know. If there is, cool. If not, you missed out. But yeah, we're going to let you pick the discount. We're offering deals on all active sports, $40 off your first month of Combo Pro, and 50% off the NBA annual package. So yeah, the links, I presume, TJ, they're in the description, I would imagine. Yes?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's go ahead and segue to receivers. Receivers. Yeah. TJ, open it up for us.
Puka Nacua, I think, is going to be my top option on the slate. Everybody's going to him a lot, but I agree with it. I like Puka in this spot. I like the idea, like Puka, Drake London, and Ladd McConkey are the chalks that I feel decent about. Those are the guys that I still want to get to and just find ways to get different in my lineup elsewhere. I do like both Nico Collins and Tank Dell. I'll let Bobby talk about them more because I know he likes them, but I find myself just getting more mixing than them, which admittedly does scare me. Brian Thomas is a guy like, Michael Pittman is a guy like, and outside of that, it's mostly just stacking up guys. I really like the idea of a Drake London, Ladd McConkey mini stack. I'm playing a ton of Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua together. Justin Jefferson is due for a breakout game, and so I'll get to there if I can. AJ Brown's coming in low owned. He's my favorite player in the Eagles and Ravens game to get to. But mostly just in like, I have AJ Brown in my one Jalen Hurts lineup. I have AJ Brown in my one Lamar Jackson lineup with Zay Flowers on the other side. I in my Anthony Richardson lineups, I have 3 of those. And so what I did is one is Pittman Pierce, one is Pierce Mitchell, and one is Pittman Mitchell. And I just kind of like rotated those guys in. But Nacua is in my core, as is McConkey and London. Outside of those, Brian Thomas too. Outside of those guys, I'm just kind of stacking them up and placing one of them in there with my favorite running backs.
Can we play both Kupp and Nacua in your cash lineup? Yeah. They both look good individually. I prefer Nacua. TJ, I don't love that idea, that premise, but they're both like fine. I think Puka's better.
I think in cash, I would go try and get something like, if you have this, I would upgrade elsewhere and go something like Nacua, Drake London, or Ladd McConkey in that spot and use that salary elsewhere instead of Kupp. Unless you're playing Stafford and you're throwing some cash, you're throwing your cash lineups and some tournament lineups too, then like, heck yeah, do that too.
I think your cash game receivers, like the pool, Nacua, I think Evans is in the pool. London, I think, is in the pool. Thomas and Ridley in that 5K area. And I guess David Moore, like you don't want to play David Moore, but I think he's in the pool for, just because of salary cap reasons, and hopefully you get to those 9 or 10 points and, the guys you're spending up on get you there.
I agree with Shannon too. Mike Evans is way too cheap. Mike Evans is a great play today. I'm kind of in the same thought process where if I'm not playing Bucky Irving, I'm playing Mike Evans.
What about playing $1 on every team?
I think that's totally viable.
I'm thinking about doing that. I hand-built my stuff. And
don't say that.
$1, 1 Saint, 1 Ram.
Don't do that to me, Dean. Don't do that to me again.
Why is that a problem? What's the issue with that?
No, it's perfectly fine, but
both he and I didn't do that with the Lions when you said to. And
when you said it, yeah,
we would have smashed.
I should have said play 6 on every lineup. I didn't say I wasn't ambitious enough. I had plenty of Lions that day, and I think I made a profit, but I saw I didn't win that wasn't me that won the millie with like 7 Lions.
Circling the drain. Friend of the show.
Is that who it was?
Yep.
Okay. Shout out to Circle and Drain. Yeah, Bobby, receivers, your approach.
I prefer T. Higgins to Puka Nacua, although I do like Nacua, especially in Stafford stacks. Like Cup, I think he's fine in Stafford stacks. David Moore's, like, I have question marks with David Moore. I like A.D. Mitchell. I like Noah Brown. They're not his price tag, but they're, I guess, cheaper than the majority. Jamar Chase, I have interest in. I like Burrow stacks. A.J. Brown, TJ hit on it. Just with him, everyone's going to go to Goddard and just play the best player on the best receiver on their team with like Hurts. That's the way I would approach it. Zay Flowers in tournaments, like him a good bit as well in that same game. TJ hit on Brian Thomas. So Nico Collins and Tank Dell I do like, but I'm more and more starting to gravitate towards like just getting Mixon in there. But if I'm playing Stroud, which I imagine I will be, I'll definitely have Collins and definitely have some Tank Dell.
I didn't mention him, but I do have a little Calvin Ridley too.
He's been pretty good of late. I think, did you mention, I think you said you have the quarterback, right? You have Levis in one lineup, who's been okay, like from a fantasy perspective. He's been all right, and he's cheap enough.
I did one Levis, Ridley, Westbrook, Akine.
Oh, NWI. It's going to happen
like Chad
again.
is mentioning, Westbrook Akine is the best receiver in all of football.
I mean, does he have a touchdown like every single week for like 5 straight weeks? Something goofy like that, right? I feel like he scored touchdowns. We got to pull up the game log. He didn't score in week 10, but he scored in week 12, week 11, week 9, week 8, week 7, and week 6. Now, he scored in week 6, and he had 7.9 DK points. He scored in week 7, and he had 9 DK points.
For what it's worth, I'm not advocating to play Westbrook Akine.
Yeah.
I'm just playing him in one large field Levis stack.
I just think he's completely. I mean, look, I understand, but I think he's kind of fraudulent. This is the old, Breaking Bad. Jesse can't keep getting away with it. He cannot keep getting away with it. I don't think. By the way, I did pull up. I was curious. Always curious what the sportsbook has for talking about Moore and Mitchell as like our cheapies, and they both have the same number. They both have the same number as far as yards, 35.5. So is Mitchell like a pivot off of Moore? What's the ownership difference between those two? I think Mitchell is clearly behind, right? And
yeah, but like not by a crazy amount. Adonai Mitchell's still picking up 11%.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference amongst those two? Give me the young, talented kid over the guy who's been around in the league for, I don't know where he was last couple of years, and like I like Mitchell over Moore.
I will say the second I click AD Mitchell, Alec Pierce is catching a bomb. AD Mitchell's.
Should we acknowledge Adam Thielen, by the way? Shannon's asking about Adam Thielen, and he's back. They don't. I mean,
he had a good end of the game last week. I think we could acknowledge Thielen. He's 4,800 though. It's not like he's in that Moore range, really. I guess
he's viable, but I agree with Bobby. I wish he was cheaper. I think you could play Joshua Palmer if you're playing a Herbert team. Speaking of Canadians, and then another cheap option that he's not David Moore cheap, but he's only $100 more than Adonai Mitchell. We talk about liking Staff, Cup, and Nacua, which I do love them, but I think Demarcus Robinson's somewhat viable too.
Demarcus Robinson at 4K, I really like. Yeah, that's a great call.
Chat, let me know your favorite 4K and under receiver on DK. Is there anybody we're missing? Mitchell 3.9, Robinson 4K. There's really not much else. It's pretty like Bourne. If you want to take a shot on one of those New England guys, Bourne or Booty, it's slim pickings. It's slim pickings on there. TJ, you gotta make one more lineup. You gotta make a Canadian stack, an all Canadian stack. Can we do that? Can we fill that out? Is that possible?
Do we have Canadian? No, I don't think so. Like where QB is for sure gonna have to be there.
If somebody grew up like in the state of Washington, maybe in Seattle, they can let him. Right, you can let him join the team.
I got Chase Brown.
Yeah, you got some stuff to work with.
Joshua Palmer.
If you're playing on FanDuel, you can play Bills, right? It's close enough.
Give me some Mechie.
Is he Canadian, Mechie?
Yeah.
You got a lot of money to play with. You. Is there anybody that's really good that's Canadian? Not necessarily.
No, Chase Brown would be and Shuba Hubbard would be the closest thing to it. So I'll get really as Canadian as I can go would be Chase Brown, Chuba Hubbard, Josh Palmer, John Mechie. Everybody else is like special teamers, linemen, kickers, long snappers.
Steve's throwing out MVS. He's 4.5. He's another one that's just kind of, sure, he can catch the 70-yard touchdown, but the ceiling is kind of rough on him. Calvin Austin, Yoshi, Yoshi's really thin, I think, especially with, Higgins obviously back. He's been a goal line target before, but did we talk about, I know we mentioned him in passing, but what's our official stand on super chalky Ladd McConkey, who I don't think he's got a game this year where he's got double-digit targets.
TJ's on him, I'm not.
Yeah. Is it just the ownership mostly, Bobby?
It's mostly the ownership. I like TJ's Colin Palmer a little bit in Herbert stacks. Not that I wouldn't play McConkey or Quentin, but I like the pivots of Palmer and Quentin Johnson versus Atlanta.
Rob wants to know if there's curling DFS in Canada. Curling is a fascinating sport. It looks like
I feel like you'd be a good curler. I feel like you'd be a great curler.
You would be?
You would be.
I was gonna go with my buddies. There was like a curling place in Miami. And somebody was like, "Yeah, let's do this on a whim," and it got canceled at the last second. We never thought of doing it again. But yeah, it must have been during like the Winter Olympics or something where people were excited about curling for a couple weeks, and you become a curling expert. Like, oh, look at that throw! Seems like a fun game though. Would you think I'd be a broom guy or a push guy?
I think you'd be a good broom guy.
They rotate. It's not just like one person only does one thing.
Oh, that they're specialists. If they're not specialists, they all do different things.
So there's 4 guys, right? And there's the lead who goes first while the other guys broom. There's the second, third, and the skip who goes last to bring things home. Skip is like the team captain, so they're the ones like kind of leading, telling people what to do.
Yeah.
But the 3 who aren't throwing are the ones brooming.
Dean's a big highlight guy too, I would imagine.
Sweeping.
You're making a joke, but I used to go to Highlight all the time when I was a young kid. Dania Highlight, Miami Highlight. I've been there before. Yeah. Dania spent a lot of time with Dania Highlight. The Fronton. I think there's in Connecticut and Orlando, but it's in very few places in America. Highlight, but it's a blast, and the crowd is electric. Well, it used to be electric. It was like it would sell out like in the 80s. It was like a big deal in the 80s, but it really withered out. But you're getting me excited about Highlight back. You're getting me nostalgic. But Rob knows. Yeah, Rob knows that the Highlight closed. It's just like a casino now, I believe. I haven't been to the casino, like poker room. Anyways, getting sidetracked. Parker Washington getting a mention from Goombas in chat. Maybe. You talked about having some Lawrence, TJ, but I'm guessing it's just Thomas and Ingram. Did you get the Parker Washington 2 last names?
I have not, but I'm actually kind of tempted to get to a Parker Washington team right now. I talked about Josh Palmer, and I didn't actually have him, and so I'm in the midst of making a Josh Palmer Herbert stack, and I kind of want to make one Parker Washington team with like full stack with maybe even a 3-man with Ingram and Brian Thomas and Trevor Lawrence.
JSN or Metcalf? I kind of like JSN over Metcalf, which is a weird thing to say, but I think that's where we're at. And like Metcalf really hasn't been practicing. If I'm playing Geno, I think I'm playing Geno in a skinny with JSN. Does anybody take on that as far as the Seattle receivers, Bobby? And you have a lean amongst those two?
I'm with JSN over Metcalf. Yeah, I think that's the way to go. And I do think you don't have to double stack Geno. What about Adams and Wilson?
You're asking the wrong people. I'm pretty sure TJ made it pretty clear he's not in on the Jets. Adams, I will say on FanDuel is really cheap at $7K. He's got a pretty good price over there. He's $7K and DK also. I just think the Jets are kind of toast, but
our Sims really like both for tournaments from an optimal versus ownership projection.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say not to play it. But one of the lower totals on the board, 41.5. By the way, Ross Weather.
Why do I feel as though Parker Washington's going to have a huge day all of a sudden?
Power of suggestion. Temperature in the mid upper 30s, 10 mile per hour sustained winds. Neither is ideal, but neither is a major impact. That's for the Jets. It's yellow for the Jets versus Seattle. I'll just drop this in chats. And again, this will get an update at some point too. Yellow in Cincinnati. It's just cold, right? Actual temperature is a hair below freezing. Feels like temperatures in the 20s. Just 5 to 10 as far as the wind, though. That's the most important thing. New England, Bobby, you get the boots in the ground. Cold, but otherwise fine.
It looks nice out my window.
Yeah. I think it's not downtown Boston, right? It's I think 20 minutes away or something.
It's like 45 minutes away.
Oh, wow. It's that far away. Jeez.
Yeah.
It's like where the Dolphins play. People think the Dolphins play against South Beach. They don't. They play at Miami Gardens. Like, they always show like this. They always show like the downtown, like, oh, here's South Beach. And then like, well, that's 30 minutes away. But that's, people don't know.
I'm going to Florida, Dean, and staying for a month. Maybe we'll meet up.
Oh, yeah. There you go. South Florida. Florida's a big state.
Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm not too far from that. Yeah, not too far. Maybe we'll have to hang out, the two of us. We get up to some shenanigans. For sure.
Oh, you'll have to babysit. It's not going to be the two of us.
I'm out. You don't. Yeah, that's not for me.
I pass my kids off to anyone I can.
There's two. That's right. Oh, that's outrageous. I'm not even signed up for one. You want to pass off on two? No chance. No chance. Tight ends. Let's talk about tight ends. About 10 minutes or so, Erik and Neil will be coming in. And then, of course, closing things out, Brit and Kristi, as well as Will, 12:10, crunch time. Whatever questions we didn't answer, whatever questions that Erik and Neil do not answer, they'll answer. They'll answer on crunch time. You want to set the table here for tight ends here, Bobby? What do you have as far as the tight end position?
Yeah, Taysom Hill going to be very chalky. I think he's a good play, good leverage off Kamara. TJ Hawkinson, I think, is in the mix. He's back versus Arizona for the Vikings, 4,400. Goddard is going to be a guy that a lot of people are going to force just because they want to get exposure to that game. And like, why not get to AJ Brown or Saquon Barkley and try different stuff elsewhere? I think my favorite tournament tight end, I hate saying this, is Hunter Henry. Doesn't seem too appealing. Dalton Schultz, I think, is in play. If you're playing Stroud stacks, I don't mind Schultz. Schultz has to get there at some point, right?
He's been so bad this year.
He's been terrible.
I mean, I don't want to be game log guy, right? But Dalton Schultz, you know how many games this year? How many games he's had double-digit DraftKings points? 0. Not
Zero.
one.
No, but that's like the entirety of their passing offense has underwhelmed outside of Nico Collins, really. Like
Collins was gone. He still didn't take advantage of it.
Might be time for Bobby to stop trying to make Schultz happen. Schultz has been his fetch all season.
I thought I had him last week, and he threw the first touchdown on the backup tight end. It wasn't Schultz.
Oh, the worst.
Yeah, Zach Ertz, like, just a pricing play every week at 3,800. Like, I'm fine with that, and I'm fine being overweight to that, especially if I can do that instead of David Moore.
TJ, jump in here as far as your favorite tight ends.
Taysom. He's number one by a wide margin for me. I like Dallas Goedert specifically if Devonta Smith is in fact out. Hawkinson in my Darnold teams, Otton in my Baker teams, Ingram in my Lawrence teams, Disley in my Justin Herbert teams. I think Isaiah Likely is a super interesting large field GPP option that nobody is ever going to play. He didn't get a single target last week, but we know Isaiah Likely is a guy that he's a boomer bust, right? And so I think Disley is a very interesting, cheap option to play alongside Lamar Jackson today that nobody's going to do in a large field. And then Tommy Tremble is going to be my favorite sub 3K punt. But Taysom is my guy.
We have Disley at 11% on DraftKings, TJ. Just a heads up. Did you say you were saying nobody was playing Disley, or you're saying somebody else? Did I misunderstand? I might have misunderstood.
No, I was saying I don't think I said nobody's playing anybody at tight end.
Okay.
I said I'll play Disley in my Herbert lineups.
Did nobody mention McBride? Like, because he's been really, really good in not scoring touchdowns. Eventually, I don't know when, I can't promise you, but at some point, he's going to get in the end zone. I know he's ran one in, and I know he's recovered a fumble in the end zone, but eventually he's going to catch the ball and either be in the end zone when he catches it or catch it and run into the end zone. It's going to happen at some point. This week, I don't know, maybe. But I would want him in my pool as well. By the way, just our projections are projecting, and the projection team normally leans in if it's like 50-50. They are saying that Devontae Smith is out, according to the projections. So Smith is projected out on our projections. He's officially doubtful, I believe, which makes me think that like Brown eventually is going to get more ownership. Goddard might get more ownership as well. We currently have Goddard at 13% at 4.3. He's kind of the safer, and then you want to get a piece of that game. We don't officially know this stuff. We probably won't officially know until 1:30, 2 o'clock or so, or actually no, 2:30 on the East Coast, because that is a 4-ish game. Juwan Johnson. Yeah, you have a Juwan Johnson take on your Saints there, TJ?
No, I'm not playing him.
Just a no, yeah. As a leverage play. It's just like
I think if you wanted to play Juwan Johnson, you should play him with Derek Carr.
Trying to see what our SimLabs stuff is saying for tight ends, giving a refresh. I want to see if we have a new batch coming in. I think it's still early, right? 7 o'clock. Yeah, okay. We'll get an update at some point. I imagine the next show or the show after that, we'll be able to discuss. But yeah, we have Goddard as like the best optimal versus projected ownership play. But I also think that ownership's going to change. And TJ, the worst play, optimal versus projected ownership is Taysom Hill, but that's mostly because his ownership is projected pretty high. Disley, Ertz also in the red. McBride in the green. Hooper. Austin Hooper. You mentioned the New England tight end, Bobby. Austin Hooper? You mentioned
nope. Will not do it. Hunter Henry.
I know Likely was talked about. The chat wants us to talk about Andrews. I think Andrews is probably like the more quote unquote obvious one, but Likely is somebody that people are not going to play basically at all.
Likely is 3.7. I like that column, Likely a good bit.
He just hasn't been as involved of late, right? He's skilled, but like he's put up zeros of late. 2 of his last 3 games, for what it's worth. The floor is rough, but so there is some talent. Trying to see if there's anybody else we should acknowledge as far as tight ends. I think we basically covered it. Hey, lineup construction question. I'm hitting the optimizer just to see what's coming out, and I'm seeing some double tight end lineups on DK, which, for me is never really uncomfortable. I'm seeing Ingram, Taysom. There's Taysom and Alvin Kamara. Taysom Kamara. We talked about playing both earlier. Are we setting any rules? Are we open to playing 2 tight ends, TJ?
Yeah, I'm open to it. I'm getting to a lot of like Taysom Disley style lineups. Pardon me. I just want to be getting access to the obscene amounts of volume Taysom Hill is getting right now. And so plus it gets you access to a game in the afternoon, so you don't have to see your lineups just fall in the afternoon. And so I'm getting to a lot of dual tight end lineups.
Bobby, any strategy as far as double tight end?
I'm in agreement with TJ on Taysom. Pretty much getting a running back like at 5K, and he also catches passes. So double tight end, I think, is a way that a lot of my teams will be built, I would imagine.
I try to avoid it, and maybe that's wrong. I'm not sure, but
it's just there's no value, Dean. What do you?
I know. No, you're like as a general thought, but like we're kind of forced into it just the way this. Like, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna play David Moore instead. That's what I'm gonna do. I don't want to do that.
Keyshawn Booty.
I don't want to do that either. I don't want to play Booty or Bourne or Pop. I don't think I want to play any of those guys. I'm open to it just to make things work. You mentioned Henry. I think Henry's fine. By the way, in chats, I missed this. Can you guys confirm? According to Young Jero, head coach says Marvin Harrison's going to get fed today. Yeah, the Maserati has not been great of late. But I don't think you mentioned Marvin at all the entire show, or Kyler for that matter. TJ, any interest in Marv?
Not a ton. I do have Marvin Harrison Jr. in my Darnold, like one or two of my Darnold teams. And so in that range, like if I'm playing Darnold, I'd rather play Marvin Harrison Jr. than, or obviously if I'm playing Kyler. But if I'm playing Darnold as a run back, I'd rather go Marvin Harrison Jr. instead of McConkey in that style lineup.
Are your Darnolds automatically doubles, or two of Hawkinson, Jefferson, Addison, or some singles? Yeah.
No. Unless the guy's name is Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts, and even in this case, on this slate, I do not have a single stack. I don't have one.
Interesting. And you like your triples? Any triples? I think you had one triple. I think you mentioned
I got a lot
earlier.
of triples.
Okay.
I got Herbert with McConkey, Johnson, and Disley. I have Carr with Kamara, Hill, and MVS. I don't have a triple with Darnold. I do have a triple with Baker. I have no triples with A. Rich. Only doubles with Stafford. Triples with Trevor Lawrence. I just threw in a couple extra lineups. One triple stack with Parker Washington. One triple stack with Devin Duvernay, who's going to be a starting receiver at 3K for these guys this week. And then I believe that's it for my triple stacks. But yeah, I got a lot of them. Oh, I even went triple stack with Lamar. I have Bateman, Zay Flowers, and Isaiah Likely.
Ooh, wow. That is ambitious. I'm assuming you have like a Brown run back or something like that in that game.
Yeah, AJ Brown.
Bobby, I did not mean to neglect you from your minutes on defense. If you have thoughts on defense, by all means, fire it off. I know it's one of your specialties. Otherwise, you got nothing?
Thank you, Dean. No, Patriots and Jaguars just pay all the way down. One of the two.
It's just save money. Is that the goal basically today? Yeah.
Save money. I guess you could play the Colts too, but they're going to be the chalk. I would imagine at 2,800. So
I think the Cardinals down there.
They've been better of late. Yeah, they've been better of late.
TJ, this is my segment.
My bad. You're right. My bad.
Stay in your lane, TJ.
Stay in your lane, TJ.
If we're talking Canadian, football players.
Yeah, if we're talking CFL, you can go. What the other one? What was the other? What's the sweeping game Dean likes?
Well, who's going to break the slate? That kind of thing. Is that what you're asking?
No, curling. You're talking about curling.
Curling.
Oh, curling. I like it all of a sudden. It is
big. You like highlight, so I would imagine
highlight is a lot of fun. You can wager on it too. I don't know if you know. I'm assuming you know that you can wager.
I know the backstory on if you've ever seen Black Mass or know anything about Whitey Bulger.
He's got a tie into highlight. I've never seen Black Mass.
Yeah, they rigged the highlight. They were rigging like the highlight.
Yeah, I knew somebody that played there and kind of sort of, without saying it, kind of sort of told me like, yeah, on occasion, somebody needs a win, that kind of thing.
Or they were doing something they might have just been booking, or I don't know.
Yeah,
something illegal.
And people yell at them like, "You're cheating!" Yeah, it's a wild.
You were one of the people yelling.
My friends mostly, yeah. One of the guys wanted to fight my friend in the parking lot. It's a whole other story. But nonetheless, we should have, okay, we got Erik coming in here as well as Neil. Before we do that, who's breaking the slate? I'm going to let TJ set the par and then see if Bobby can raise him. What do you got, TJ?
Stafford double stacks with both Puka and Cup. You got to play both.
Okay, see it and raise it.
I'm looking. Give me a minute.
You didn't know this segment was coming.
I'm going to go Kyron Williams.
I'm going to pick somebody on Tampa. And I want to say you know what? I'm going to say Mike Evans.
I was thinking about saying Mike Evans.
I was thinking about Bucky Irving too. So Rams, I'm telling you guys, Rams, Saints, and Bucks. That's what you need today.
You could just backload and just play nobody in the 1:00 games and just like take a nap if you want and make some decent lineups out of those last 3 games. But all right, let's go ahead and seamlessly bring on Neil and Erik. Neil, Erik, any fringe where we were talking curling? This is what we're doing in week 13. We're digging in the curling. We're digging in the highlight. Is it anybody have a good curling story, a good curling anecdotes, or any other? You got to have some fringe sports up there. Axe. I bet Neil has some axe throwing experience up there.
I have a little bit of axe throwing experience. I mean, just casually, like I've been 3 times, I think, axe throwing. I was really good immediately, and then by the end of the first session, other people were better than I was, so that was kind of a bummer. And the most recent time, I was pretty average. You know, I'm a decent axe thrower. I'm not a great axe thrower, admittedly. I have been curling once. I have some friends who were in a curling league for just a year, I think, and they needed subs. So my wife and I came in and subbed. But where I used to live in St. Paul, there was a curling place like just down the street. I lived on kind of a big street in St. Paul, and there was like a big curling center, and apparently there's a bar up top. So like one of our neighbors,
every curling rink's got a big bar up top.
Yeah, so I kind of want to get into curling at some point, but I've only been once in my life so far.
You think
curlers love to drink? Weirdly enough, it's very much part of the culture in Saskatchewan. Like it's a really good, especially as you get older, thing to do to say like somewhat active. But I've never actually stepped on a rink myself before, but very aware of the culture. There's always a nice bar up top there. I gotta say, seeing these guys come on kind of reminded me of it. I felt like I was on the wrong show today, and I should have been on the GPP Final Takes with some of the wild receiver calls that I was making. But Erik, is it time for your guy Parker Washington and no ownership today?
It's time for somebody. He was definitely going to get brought up at some point. Anytime that there's a slate where I can dig into gross pivots off of David Moore chalk, like we may spend an hour talking about awful NFL wide receivers, and none of them will score any points, but they won't be as owned as David freaking Moore in week.
Playing a lineup with Devin Duvernay tonight.
Do we know where David Moore was in 2022, 2023? His Pro Football Reference is not. Was he in the USFL? I know, Neil, you were a big XFL guy for a period. Did he make a cameo there? I don't know. I'm sure. I guess we can.
David, I don't believe so. I don't remember him being in the XFL.
He wasn't good enough.
UFL this year, yeah.
UFL, any of the, but he has not caught a pass in the NFL prior to this season until 2020. So, and he's still shockingly only 29, which I thought I would have definitely bet the over.
He was curling in Saskatchewan. He was curling in Saskatchewan for a couple of years.
He's a hell of a sweeper. He's not a great pusher, but his sweep game is legit. All right. Myself, Bobby, TJ, we appreciate y'all watching. TJ's not going anywhere. He's just going to be behind the scenes. He'll be producing. But myself and Bobby, we're going to go ahead and make some lineups. Do hit that like button. Do subscribe. Turn on notifications. Don't go anywhere. Still 2 hours. Nonstop NFL DFS conversation. Erik, take it away.
Shouts to the People Show. We are, of course, GPP Final Takes. It's week 13. If you haven't been with us before, where have you been? Why are you showing up just now in week 13? God bless you for getting into DFS at this time. But if it is your first time, we're not necessarily going to go position by position or game by game, as the title of the show kind of dictates. We are going to try to hit all of the, kind of high notes, the most important things that you need to think about, put into your 150 set or your single entry team for tournaments today. And at the end, we'll give kind of some of our scorching hot takes, our flag plants of the tournament slate, what's going to win, say, the Millie Maker today. But we always try to lead in, Neil, with, like a theme of the slate, if you will. And for me, it's kind of a segue from the conversation we were just having, gross wide receivers, David Moore, all that kind of stuff. To me, it's Thanksgiving, right? It's the week of Thanksgiving. So we have a smaller slate, even though that there's no buys, only 10 games. There's really no injuries other than J.K. Dobbins, which nobody even wants to play. J.K. Dobbins goes down and his backups are cheap and nobody wants to play him, which I understand. But so the pricing is like not super tight, but not super loose. And we want to play AJ Brown and Joe Mixon and Nico Collins and Justin Jefferson and Saquon Barkley. We have Bijan Robinson. We want to play all these guys, but you can't afford them, right? You can maybe afford a couple of them. You have to make some concessions, and you probably have to find some gross plays to click in. That's kind of my theme of this one, is every lineup has to have some kind of plug your nose. I don't know if you're feeling the same way, but I found lineup building to be easy until you get to maybe that last spot or two. That last 2v2 is like, oh boy, am I really playing this guy? It's kind of a weird slate in that way.
Depends on whether you can accept Adonai Mitchell as the guy you need, the slate breaker at 3,900, and the nice pivot off of David Moore. If you feel comfortable with the click of Adonai Mitchell, then maybe you can make a lineup that you feel completely comfortable with. But of course, he hasn't really done much so far, so maybe it's not a comfortable click for most. But yeah, I mean that is true. We don't have a ton of injuries. I guess that's the one. We do have Josh Downs out, so that's why we get to play Adonai Mitchell. But yeah, man, David Carr being chalky. I feel like we're all going to just like talk trash about it. And then he's going to put up like 8 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. And people are going to be like, you donkeys didn't play the free square David Moore. But yeah, he's like an objectively bad play at 20% on the card or on the Panthers. Yeah, I think you kind of nailed the overview of the slate. Like, I think I like a lot of plays in the later part, the late afternoon games. But yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about but there's some like value-ish running backs that we like.
Right.
Even if you don't want to go down to Gus Edwards, you could go to Chase Brown and Bucky Irving or Rashad White, so we do have like sort of value-ish plays at running back, but no like really awesome value.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. So let's talk about the running back stuff first, because I think it's a little bit smaller pool. A lot of weeks, actually, through 12 weeks, we've come on and been like, I don't know, man, like the 15th highest owned running back is like in play, like I like him. I'm not saying that that's not the case today, but of course there's just less games, fewer teams. I don't feel quite as strong about the running backs. I think part of that is I'm interested in your take on the mega spend ups. Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry both in theoretically bad matchups. A little more excited about both passing games in that one, and that's been foolish. Anytime we've ever been considering the Eagles passing game, it has always just been no dumb, just play Saquon Barkley. So maybe that's something we'll have to dive into. But at the top, I do like those guys. Joe Mixon, of course, really stands out. Bijan Robinson, those guys are garnering some ownership, but there's nobody like that's a must necessarily at the top of running back. How are you kind of thinking about when you do spend up at running back? What are you doing with those top 5-6 guys?
Yeah, I think I will be pretty spread out. And yes, I am a dumb. I will be going back to the passing game for the Eagles more so than the running game. But like 5% ish ownership for Saquon and Derrick Henry. I really like, I want them to be chalky so I can fade them in bad matchups, but it's like, that's so low ownership. They are so awesome. Like how can you not want to play them at 5%? So I'll probably match the field there. I don't think it's going to be like, if they were like 2%, I think I would prioritize them more. I'd try to get to like 10% of each, but 5% feels about fair for Saquon and Derrick Henry. So I kind of imagine I'm probably going to be right with the field is essentially the way I'm playing those two. My preferred spend ups. I mean, hard to argue with Kamara, not a bad matchup. Really the only downside there is 31% ownership. The Saints, no guarantees that they put up a lot of points. So I probably end up light on 31%, but I imagine he might be, I think Mixon will be my highest owned because he's actually getting pretty reasonable ownership as of right now. He's getting like 11% ownership. That's kind of insane to me if that holds. I suspect it won't hold. I think he'll probably get up to at least like 15%, but
I was going to say 15 to 20 maybe, but like, I don't think he's going to run away. I don't think he's a runaway freight train ownership wise. I just think it's maybe a little light.
I think you're probably right about that. And I don't know. He's got the best matchup. He is cheaper than Saquon and Henry. He also just has an awesome role, and he's really good this year. Like he looked not that great in Cincinnati. He's been like, you just watch him play. He looks like a new running back this year. So yeah, I think Mixon probably and I guess I should sort by salary, make sure I'm sort of by ownership right now. I think that's true though. I think that he holds as my, at least of the guys that are like 7,500 plus. Mixon will be the one that I have the most exposure to because I think I like him just as much as anybody in a vacuum. And then he's getting reduced ownership relative to Kamara, who's the only other one that I like kind of compares to me for me in terms of like just raw like how much I would want to play them without ownership being a factor. So I think probably Mixon number 1 for me, Kamara number 2, Barkley number 3, Henry number 4, Brees number 5 of that group. I think Brees, I'm a little bit concerned about injury there. Maybe like they called up a running back from the practice squad, I believe, and he's been a little bit banged up. So I don't know if he's going to play. And even if he does play, just like they play such a slow pace and the offense seems broken. So I think he's still number 5 for me.
Seattle has been. I've been chasing the Seattle defense tail for a while, and it has not gone. It has not gone particularly well with opposing anybody, but opposing running backs, especially. The Jets, I think if I'm starting from the end and going to, I think Brees is probably kind of the first cut for me amongst the elite running backs. It's nothing against Brees Hall. He's an incredible real life football player. He's definitely going to catch some passes. It's just like we got to make cuts somewhere. And I prefer Bijan to him for a little bit cheaper. And I much prefer the really all the spend ups, probably not Derrick Henry, but so maybe Derrick Henry and Brees are kind of my 2 cuts. Is like, look, if Derrick Henry does it again today against the Eagles, without catching any passes at what is he, 7,800 on DraftKings, like that's fine. The big thing for me that stands out this whole season, really, and when you're talking about Joe Mixon, he's also my favorite amongst the spend ups. And I, sometimes this is right, sometimes this is wrong. I'm very much like a matchup based kind of guy when I'm breaking ties. And some people will tell you just crunch it and let it spit out what it's going to spit out for you. But Joe Mixon has been the second best fantasy running back in all of the NFL this year. And now I know he's priced as such, but I don't think the ownership is coming in. Like if Saquon was just a little cheaper in this matchup, even if Saquon was the same price in the matchup that Joe Mixon is in, we'd be like, we got to put just start your lineup with Saquon Barkley. Joe Mixon is not quite that. But he's averaging 21.1 PPR points on the season. Saquon is averaging 24. So that's a nice little gap, right? Saquon is obviously the man, but we're talking about the RB2 here. We're talking about a guy who just dropped 35 on Dallas, has 1, 2, 3, 4 games of at least 24, another game of 17, another game of 17. Like he's as much as we want it to be the CJ Stroud and Nico Collins and Tank Dell show, it isn't. It's the Joe Mixon show, and those other guys got to get there on the scraps. And I'm just not sure there's that many scraps against. I just don't see Jacksonville necessarily being the team that's, going to totally punch back. Right. At least not to where the Texans change their I don't think they're going to change how they want to play because of what the Jaguars end up doing on offense. So Joe Mixon is the guy for me up there, and I'll be tilting at about 6 p.m. later when Saquon and Derrick Henry rip off a bunch of long touchdown runs. Let's move down a little bit. Let's answer a couple questions, and then we'll hit like the mid to cheap. I think we can lump all the mid to cheap tier running backs together, but want to make sure keep your questions coming. We'll kind of periodically in between kind of some conversations hit as many of those as we can. We talked about Brees, but Erik wants to know what about the pass game? They are playing Seattle. It's like not the world's worst matchup. The pricing is not terrible he asked specifically about Devontae, but if you prefer Garrett Wilson, what do you think about the Jets? The Jets passing game, what about that game as a whole? It's one of the few getting like 0. Nobody's playing anybody really in that game.
Yeah, I'm not enthusiastic. I think the one piece that, I think looks really good is Devontae Adams on FanDuel, where he's 7,000, stands out as point per dollar, a great play. But I think all would qualify as playable. I don't really see anything if you look at the game logs since since Devontae Adams joined the Jets, there's nothing really separating them. They're running about the same number of routes. They're getting about the same number of targets. I don't really see any reason to separate one from the other than, again, Devontae Adams' price on FanDuel looks really good. I think both just look playable. If you want to make the guess that the bet that Aaron Rodgers is going to look like Aaron Rodgers in this game, then sure, they'd be great at low ownership. He just hasn't been that good. The offense has been kind of broken. I'm not really, enthusiastic about it. It is a great matchup. As you said, I've wanted to play offenses against Seattle. I've played running backs, I've played wide receivers, and I think it is a good matchup for the Jets. So I think that it's fine. I struggle with, do you want to try a double stack there? Do you want to do an Aaron Rodgers double stack? But then it's they play at such a slow pace. Can they really get there with both receivers? And I'm not totally convinced that they can.
He
So
does really.
it's,
I'm so torn because he does really only throw it to those guys, which is like
I know.
really, really nice.
Yeah.
And if you can just hit a couple big plays to offset, but like they don't hit big plays either. It's one thing to play slow and hit a couple 40-yard shots, right? Because then at least still the drive still only took 4 minutes or whatever, and you went and scored. But when it's 12 plays and you run the game clock down every single time, it's like they just suck the whole life out of the whole game.
Yeah, it's like it can happen. It could happen for sure. I don't know. It's so I guess my thought is both are playable. I would say like removing Aaron Rodgers from the equation, both Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson are playable in GPPs. But I don't have any like separation metric. Like I don't have any clear preference. I think both of them are getting about the ownership that they should. I think around 5% ish is about right there. Do you see anything different than I do with those guys?
No, I don't. I'll just point out, I don't hate Ken Walker. I just want to, as we're having the conversation about running backs, I know it has not gone well for Ken Walker, relatively speaking. So basically scoring 13 fantasy points every single week. As I pull up the game log, we haven't had the big game, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the spot, but we know what Ken Walker can do. He reminds me of Jaden Reed on Thanksgiving the other day. Now he didn't quite hit the home run we hoped for, but it was pretty close, right? Two touchdowns. Just betting on the talent in a fine matchup is kind of like this matchup is like fine. You're not running away from the Jets defense, no pun intended. And the same thing with the Dolphins on Thursday. It was like, it's fine. Like it's not ideal. It's not the Panthers, but like Ken Walker could score 3 touchdowns and break a long run here, I think, in this one. So I do like him. And then I think JSN, I'm probably not playing him in my like single entry or main team, but he would be in my pool. I think I kind of think he's just emerged, and maybe I'm totally wrong about that. I think some of the I think the last 2 weeks are maybe a little bit over the top, especially the 40 ball or whatever. But I think generally speaking, his projection is often baked in, right? 2 years, the sample size that we have of him. And I just think he's a much better player than that now. I could be wrong, but I think that those two guys are really the crux for me. Couple more questions before we dive into some of these running backs. This is a good one from Shiv Daddy that we didn't talk about that I should have brought up. But of course, the Sunday night football game is on the FanDuel slate. And what do you think about Christian McCaffrey after a couple of rough games and a not amazing matchup here? And I believe some gnarly weather up there in Buffalo. I don't know if he's from California. Is CMC from California, or where's he went to Stanford?
I don't know. I don't know where he's from. Yeah.
How many snow games has Christian McCaffrey played in? I think we need somebody on looking that one up. But what do you think about CMC versus Kamara or that tier of running backs on FanDuel specifically?
Yeah, I was just I saw a Carolina guy asking to rank running backs on FanDuel, so I was just typing that up and sort of struggling with the order to do it on FanDuel. Like it's because they're like the prices are so different on FanDuel. They're all so expensive. So I'm just looking at above 8,000. My ranking. I have Kamara number 1. Like he's 8,300 on FanDuel. Still has a great role. He's getting some ownership, but cheaper than everybody else on FanDuel. So Kamara to me looks like the number 1 running back there. Barkley number 2 for me on FanDuel. Again, not really a PPR guy, so that doesn't hurt him on FanDuel. He's cheaper than Mixon on FanDuel and only getting 5% ownership. So when you factor all that in, and they are they're a run first team. So even as much as I want to play the passing game, when I see Barkley at 5%, he looks pretty good to me. So I think Barkley's number 2 for me there. Bijan number 3 for me on FanDuel. 8,500. So the price is pretty good. The matchup's pretty good for Bijan. The role has been exceptional recently. And then it gets hairy. I think probably it's Krayton for me over McCaffrey at 8,400, 16.5% ownership. And then probably McCaffrey. My concern with McCaffrey, even more so than the weather, is Trent Williams being out. Just like that offensive line is going to be hurting. Like that's just not a great offensive line without Trent Williams. So hard to be too enthusiastic. They couldn't really get anything going last week. Now Brock Purdy expect to be back for this game, so maybe that changes. Maybe that's probably a bigger factor than Trent Williams being out, having your quarterback back in the game, and he's been really good. But regardless, I think it's tough without Trent Williams. They're really tough defense. I guess they're not as good against the run. But I think McCaffrey probably slots in after Krayton for me. I might be crazy to not be more enthusiastic because he's only getting 11% ownership. I think it's just the matchup scares me a little bit. I'm not sure they're going to be able to get much going. And then Trent Williams being out. I don't know. It's I'm probably not as enthusiastic as I should be. How do you feel about McCaffrey?
It pretty much like you, lukewarm. I mean, I also think it's just we can see kind of all angles and just kind of we have to land on a take or whatever, But Christian McCaffrey is still probably some form of Christian McCaffrey. He's cheaper, lower ownership, right, than he would have been. If this was week 1 and we had this price and this ownership, we'd be like, guys, what are we doing here? We got to play Christian McCaffrey. But we can also say, okay, the guy has been out for a long time. He's not 24 anymore. And the offense without the splits without Trent Williams that you mentioned are stark. So now we have, not a great situation for a bunch of scoring with bad weather. I'm not like worried about, aren't you worried? I'm not worried about, there being zero scoring in this game. But, if teams run a little bit more, you play a little bit slower sometimes in the bad weather because you just can't physically be, so it just makes the game environment a little bit worse. And I think it's fair to say the Niners as a whole and Christian McCaffrey himself have not been as good as they have looked historically, right? The plus side, it's basically must win. Last week was probably must win. Yeah, they went from like a 20% to make the playoffs down to like a 10% to make the playoffs. If they lose this, it's basically over. So he's going to play probably the whole game. So I get it. I'm still just kind of like, if he fits, right? If it's but I'm not prioritizing. It would have been historically. I'm like, yeah, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Put just slot CMC in. Let's move on and figure it out. He's more of like if he fits, it makes sense on a team. I'm cool with it, but I'm not like I got to get 50% CMC on FanDuel. I don't feel that way today. Keep the questions coming. We'll hit some more of those here in a second, but I do want to, as Johnny said, Chase Brown mentions Chase Brown, a segue into kind of a moving down the running back pricing tier a little bit, especially on DraftKings. The two names for me that jumped out the most. One is Chase Brown playing basically every snap. Another must-win game, Cincinnati Bengals. We're definitely in this spot where I think it's important to bring up some of those motivational type factors. And the Bengals in a very much must-win season's basically over if they lose today. Chase Brown's playing. Speaking of Christian McCaffrey, Chase Brown has basically become the Christian McCaffrey, playing every snap, catching a bunch of passes. Steelers matchup, not so great. Weather potentially not amazing. Any outdoor game basically. Not on the West Coast is not great right now. 6,200 looks like a pretty good price, but again, I'm like, I see it. I don't know how much I love it against the Steelers. And then Bucky Irving, I think, another guy who everybody has discussed as the week has gone on, unfortunately for us, but 5,800 on DraftKings. And I think just the trend line, right, just continues to rise and rise and rise for Bucky. 6 targets alongside his he would have had more touches even last week if it didn't turn into such a blowout. What do you think about Chase Brown, Bucky, and any of the kind of 6-ish K on down running backs?
Yeah, I'm admittedly like so torn about Chase Brown because my first instinct was like, well, I can't play Chase Brown against the Steelers. Like the Steelers defense is so good. Like, why would I want to play a running back against the Steelers who's chalky? Like he's getting some ownership. But then you look at projections and it's like he should be a lot chalkier than he is. Like if you just look around the industry at Chase Brown's projection, it's like, man, his projection is insanely high for 6,200. And enough people are like me who are like, oh, I don't want to play a running back who's going to be chalky against the Steelers. So they're disinclined. So I think ultimately I probably want to match the field, like at least match. Like he's a very strong projection play. You just look at, like you said, the role for Chase Brown. Just imagine like if it were Christian McCaffrey here instead of like insert the name Christian McCaffrey. 62 carries over the past 3 weeks without Zach Moss. Chase Brown has 62 carries, so more than 20 carries per game. 22 targets, so more than 7 targets per game. That is Christian McCaffrey usage. Now, yeah, probably not Christian McCaffrey talent. Nobody's really Christian McCaffrey talent, but I think he's pretty good. I think he's got, the ability to break off big plays. If it were like just a mediocre defense, I would be super enthusiastic about it. It's just the Steelers are tough. So I think ultimately, like if the field is going to be 30%, I think I'm probably going to match the field at 30%. I think that is about the fair number. So if the field comes in significantly higher, I'll be happy to be underweight. If the field comes in at 15%, I'd love to be double the field. So it's kind of hard to predict, but I think 30% feels about efficient to me. How are you playing Chase Brown?
That's how I feel. It's kind of funny where he's clearly a very strong play, but I'm being pretty cognizant of how I put lineups together. around him. I think he's going to be a bit of that default, like you said, in 30-ish, depending upon the contest you're in. Percent of lineups as that like all right, I'm getting a good projection at 6,200, which is kind of rare on this slate. There's not that many like mid-tier guys where like projects really, really well. There's some fine plays, which we'll get into, but nobody is just like, all right, I'm getting all the work. I click him in and I'm like, he's not going to fit. He's not going to be the reason this lineup loses. He may not be the one that takes it over the top, but I'm going to get my 15, right? You're like, I'm going to get my 15 from Chase Brown. Maybe he gets 20 plus. Cool. Yeah. So I think people will default to that. So I'm like, making sure I don't do that with kind of like the whole team. I'm like, all right, let's plug the Kamara, because that's how Kamara is too. Everybody, you're always just like,
the floor.
I know he's expensive, but I'm just always going to get 15 plus, right? No matter what, I'm going to get it. So like if I start plugging all those guys in, right, and then you're like, okay, I got Puka, okay, I got Taysom, okay, you're like, oh shit, I got all the guys that everybody's doing that with as well. So I actually think I'm curious in your thoughts on Bucky. I actually think I like Bucky a little bit more than Chase Brown. Now he's gotten, pretty trendy as well. But I think the projections are holding him back just enough that if you're just an opto bro, it's not going to give you like all the Bucky. Like you got to make some tweaks to get all of the Bucky. So similarly, I don't think his ownership's like going to completely run away from me. He's not going to, no one's sneaking up on anybody with Bucky Irving against the Panthers, but I think we haven't quite reached like total runaway levels where like, if he's what we think he might be down the stretch here, 5,800 against the Panthers is laughable, like truly laughable. But the historic, production and usage, we don't quite have it just yet, other than last week, to really make the projection just like jump off the page.
Yeah, exactly. One final Power says the Steelers zone defense will open up runs for Chase Brown. That is also good. Now we looked into that on another show that I was on, like the Steelers second worst in the NFL against zone defense against running backs. So maybe that opens things up for Chase Brown a little bit. Bucky Irving, I'm with you. I kind of thought he was going to be chalkier than he is. 17% projected right now seems pretty fair. That's probably a number that I want to be on top of. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing Bucky come in at 30% because people played a ton of Bucky Irving last week. And I was like, I would have been really into it if people were not on it. But then it was like, man, everybody's just slamming in Bucky Irving. And at that point, we had no real indication that he had taken over the lead back role from Rachaad White. So it was like, what are we doing? And then, of course,
we got Sean Tucker news that was like, we got to get Sean Tucker involved. We have to get him the ball. And we kind of did, but he fumbled.
Right. Yeah. So kind of lucked out there. I think we read those quotes on this show last week that it was like, we want to get Sean Tucker involved. And sure enough, he gets goal line carries. But so now at 17%, I think I want to be overweight to the field. It's just a matter of, I kind of think he's probably going to come in higher than that because people are excited about Bucky Irving. It's like, this is a name that people want to be playing right now. He's exciting. He's playing against the Panthers. He's not expensive. So I kind of wouldn't be surprised if Bucky Irving ends up in 30% of lineups, at which point it would be more of a question for me.
I think that's pretty efficient. Would you say?
Yeah,
I think that's an efficient.
So similar to what we were saying with Chase Brown. Maybe you just play 30% and just hope the field does play 17%. And like, then great. Then I'm well over the field and I want to be. And if the field matches you at 30%, then all right, whatever. That's so be it. I still have 30%. He looks good. Yeah, I think Bucky last week, 56.3% route participation, 6 targets last week. It was the first time, I believe, all season that Bucky has run more routes than Rachaad White with Rachaad White active. So that's kind of promising, obviously, for Bucky Irving. It had been previously like Rachaad White's just always there as the passing game back. So if you remove that and suddenly it's the Bucky show, he's going to look great. And this is a great spot to play him, obviously, against the Panthers. So I like Bucky Irving quite a bit. I will say I'm still going to play some Rachaad White and just like, well, what if that was just a 1-game fluke? Rachaad White, massive leverage. If we do see Bucky Irving come up to 30% ownership, and Rachaad White's at 3%, I'll take the leverage all day on Rachaad White, who had been the passing game back, also has that great matchup. So I like Rachaad White also. I don't know if I play them together, but I like both. How about
I think you can. I don't think it's the
I
craziest.
think they're cheap enough. You probably can. Yeah.
I kind of prefer the leverage. I always tend to prefer the leverage. It's like, how do you jump past everybody? Is Bucky doesn't get the points and your guy's much lower owned, right? And that's the ideal scenario. But I don't think it's crazy on this short slate in particular to just like I played. This is not a brag because it didn't work, but I played both line. I do this frequently on short slates, I play both Lions running backs and just say, please, no Dan Tipper touchdowns today. No, no Brock Wright touchdowns. Let's just get it all to the running backs. Of course, they everybody shit the bed in that game. We don't need to get into it, but my God. But I think the Bucks could be that today. I actually think I just wanted to shout Sean Tucker. I don't think he's crazy. Maybe more of a large field type play, but he got the interesting thing that is like still has me like a little weird on Bucky. They don't love him at the goal line, and I understand it. He's like 185 pounds or whatever. He's dynamic as hell. Like he's awesome with the football in his hands. But once we get down to the 1 or the 2, it's like, there's only so much the tiny little guy can do. And he's not he hasn't been effective at the only area of the field. Only thing he's not been effective at is at the goal line and pass protection. So what does that mean? He's running routes as opposed to staying in him and blocking. And Rashad is still a better pass blocker. But Sean Tucker was the guy who they gave Rashad White a touchdown at the end. They were just like, okay, let's make sure Rashad doesn't feel too bad. He can have the last touchdown, I believe it was. But Sean Tucker got he fumbled, but he got the first goal line carry. He also scored a touchdown. I don't think that the stuff they said last week should be thrown in the garbage. Just be like, all right, Bucky, it was Bucky. I still think they're all three going to play. And I still think remember that game Sean Tucker went for like 40 fantasy points or whatever it was? Yeah. Like that's not dead. Like he's not drawing dead to, maybe that total outcome, but like breaking off a bunch of runs and having a really good game against the Panthers is not crazy to me. I think I think you can play any of these guys basically is what I'm saying in tournaments. And I think they're all a good way to find some form of salary savings in a really good spot. And 2 of them are not owned, which I think is really helpful on this slate because it's hard to find savings that other people aren't using.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call. I thought about whether I want to go to Sean Tucker, and I think it would make sense here. Could also just see like maybe they blow them out. Maybe they want to give Sean Tucker more usage on the 27th. Offensive coordinator Liam Cohen on whether he envisions a goal line role for Sean Tucker. This is from the Coach Speak Index Discord. So this is just this week. He said, you tried to look for some of those situational football things to give guys roles to make it easier for us in terms of rotating and things like that. Whether we continue to go that way or not, I couldn't really tell you. It was more just that was kind of the thought coming off the bye was to get him in on the first drive, get him in as we kind of talked about in here to get him in the flow of the game early. So I don't know what you make of that quote. It's just like we want to get him in the game and I guess we'll throw him in there at the 1 yard line. Why not? Yeah. It's just, yeah, but I'm with you. Like, because he's getting like virtually zero ownership, I think Sean Tucker is playable. If he were even like 5%, I'd be like, I don't want to do that. But at zero ownership, I'll take a few shots.
I think his efficient ownership, staying on that subject, is a few percent, whatever, a couple percent or something like that. So when he, like you said, I don't, particularly on the contest, you're playing some real small field stuff. You might be the only person with Sean Tucker, which is always kind of nice to have that kind of a leverage. I'm going to hit a couple questions and then we'll make sure we hop to some stacks. You guys are asking some good questions about some stacks. There's a couple questions that related to the running backs that we're talking about here. One was, we have to talk about J.K. Dobbins being out. And are you playing any of the 2 or I guess 3 remaining? Hassan Haskins doesn't particularly seem like a great DFS play, but of course, no J.K. Dobbins. And we have Gus Edwards. God, I can't believe we still have week 13 in 2024. It's almost 2025. We're still talking about Gus Edwards in fantasy football, but Kamani Vidal, kind of popped up, is expected to be kind of fill in for some of the J.K. Dobbins stuff, maybe especially as a pass catcher. What are you doing, if anything, with the Charger situation? Then the other one that was a really good question, if you could touch on Brian Robinson. Austin Eckler put on IR, unfortunately, gnarly, really, really bad looking concussion from Austin Eckler. I
didn't see it.
I believe on the kick return, which is just like, don't get me started on the whole having him return kicks. But nonetheless, Brian Robinson, not even on the injury report after he sprained his ankle and left that game. But two situations where we have some injury stuff, but nobody really wants to play those spots. What do you think about those 2?
Yeah, I think I'm happy that we're still talking about Gus because I drafted too much of him in best ball. I was one of the few who was like, he's probably not that dusty. And it turns out he is super dusty. He looked okay coming back from his long absence. And like the coach speak was really good. Like, this is the best we've seen him all year. First game back, 5.5 yards per carry. Second game back, 4.5 yards per carry. So it's like, all right, dip a little bit, but like better than he was early in the year by far. And then last game, 9 carries for 11 yards, 1.2 yards per carry. So it does appear that he might be dusty at this point. But if he's going to get 18 carries at 4,300 and maybe sees a target, like you're not expecting much from
He
Gus
had a target
Edwards.
last week. He had a
Yeah,
target.
he has 2 targets on the year, so he can see a target. Yeah, I think he's playable. If you assume that he's going to get like 18 carries at 4,300, like even without a passing game role, he should be able to get you 6 fantasy points, like 6 or 7 without a touchdown. And then you throw in a touchdown and suddenly it's like, all right, I want this. And if you throw in 2 touchdowns, then suddenly it's like, all right, this was a strong play. So I think he is playable. What is the ownership on Gus Edwards?
Not that high because nobody's excited about it.
Nobody is. Yeah, he's so at low ownership, I'm trying to find the exact number here. 10% is, so that's, I probably come in underweight to 10% Gus Edwards, in part because I think I will take a few shots on Kamani Vidal also. Like I think I think Vidal is at least interesting. I think there is some potential that they're just like, all right, Gus is just not getting it done. Vidal looks like he's got a little bit more juice. The quote I can read from Greg Roman this week: "We fully expect Kamani to step in if JK can't go," which obviously now we know JK can't go, which doesn't look like he will this week. He's been in there before, might get a little bit bigger workload. We'll see. We have full confidence in him and where he's at. It's past the midway point of the season, so there are no rookies anymore. Everybody feels great about him. I could kind of see him just like maybe Gus Edwards gets the first, the first series.
I would expect he gets the first carry for sure.
Yeah, he'll get the first carry. But if he's still getting 2 yards per carry, like why wouldn't you give a shot to the rookie who has shown some juice in the past? So I think I'll probably take some shots on Kamani Vidal and just hope that he can take over that role. So I'm probably under 10% on Gus Edwards. I probably maybe have 10% cumulatively between them, but for me, it's probably more like 7% Gus, 3% Kamani Vidal, something like that. I'm not playing any Hassan Haskins. How about you? How are you approaching it?
No Hassan Haskins for me as well. I also really like the running back situation, similar to the Sean Tucker, Rashad White stuff, because Justin Herbert's going to be very popular, and as he should be. The price on DraftKings is stupid, and the matchup is very good, and they're throwing more. He's running more. He looks great. Like I have no notes, no negative things to say about Justin Herbert. I do maybe have some negative things to say about 15%, $6,100 Lab McConkey. Like we're gonna keep doing this Lab McConkey, like the Deontay Johnson thing. It's like we're gonna not this year because he actually popped off a couple times with Andy Dalton, but like the Steelers version of it was just like, guys, like you're gonna get your 14 or whatever,
right?
Like, but are you gonna win tournament? Like, so Lab McConkey projects for 15 points, and most of the time he's going to score 15 points, and like that's great, right? It's a great median projection for his price. It's just like where do we win tournaments with Lab McConkey? So I kind of like the running backs as a way to get away from that. The pass game has a better matchup, right? I'm concerned about Gus. I'm concerned about Vidal. We all agree on all of that, but there's really no value on this slate. Like we're talking about David Moore being popular. David Moore is popular on this slate because we just don't know what to do, right? Well, this guy played every snap and got 10 targets. So let's dig, right? That's why are we talking about Sean Tucker? Why are we talking about Rashad White? Why are we talking about Kamani Vidal? Because like we need some savings somewhere. And there's a few spots where if it comes through, and like you said, either Gus gets 18 carries and 2 targets and runs efficiently, has the 5 yards per carry Gus as opposed to the 2 yards per carry Gus, scores a touchdown, boom, right? Or Gus is Gus. Kamani Vidal steps in, he's catching passes, right there. Maybe he fits the new way they're trying to play now. They're throwing more. Maybe it's Kamani Vidal. Now you get 65% of the work from the 4K unowned Chargers back. Like I want to take shots on one of these kind of situations. And so those running backs feel really good to me. What about B-Rob? Are you going to do anything with B-Rob? They are my concern, leading the witness. Jeremy McNichols is still there. Chris Rodriguez is still back in the fold. Chris Rodriguez a couple of weeks ago, like freaking 13 carries or something in a game. It's not a great matchup. Washington offense isn't exactly humming right now. I just don't have a lot of excitement for it. But if you said, again, 2 months ago, no Eckler, B-Rob pretty cheap, unowned. I would have liked it. What do you think about the Washington deal?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going there. Just a tough matchup with Tennessee. Pretty good defense there. He's 6,100. I don't know. I can see it. Like if you want to go to him, I think he's a fine play. It's just there are others that I prefer. Like I think I would rather go to Chase Brown for $100 more expensive, even with some concerns about Chase Brown. I think I'd rather go to Tony Pollard, a couple $100 more expensive. Maybe even Najee. So like just looking at the other running backs in that range, and even of them being many of them being like fairly mid in my opinion, like given the matchup and everything. I am probably not going to get too much B-Rob. I also think like I do have concerns that he maybe is a little bit banged up, like might be a little bit limited in this game. So that's part of it for me. Like I don't think he does just like take on full workload minus Eckler, like that kind of workload. I think it's still going to be, they will mix in the other running backs. So if I'm wrong, then he's going to look great. But I'm kind of I'm anticipating that it's going to be a split backfield just because of injury limitations. So I don't think I get to much B-Rob.
I agree, and shout out Chad in the chat. I'm not trying. Look, there's no bigger Lab McConkey fan than me. I'm a huge fan. The best ball bags could use it. If there's a wide receiver who's breathing and walking and on the field, please score some fantasy points because I don't have very many wide receivers left standing. He had a 32-point game, right? But that was also, if you recall, he had 6 targets in a 32-point game. He broke the long, crazy fluky. They missed a bunch of tackles, and Lab's really good at football. So like
that was all fourth quarter, right? That was like the final drive or two.
He was doing nothing, and then he caught the long 65-yard touchdown where it was like a 20-yard pass, and then he breaks it, which is what good football players do. And then he caught the next touchdown too, I think. So he's his high is 9 targets against Cincinnati, which is great. I'm just not sure I want to play into ownership on those guys. It's not that I expect a bad game. It's just that when everybody's playing that really strong projection that maybe has a capped ceiling, relatively speaking, I do think it's within the range of outcomes that they just say, no Dobbins, we're slinging this puppy, and McConkey's our best receiver. So that's definitely in the range of outcomes. I just think then, okay, now I'm playing the Herbert McConkey stack. Maybe I'm playing London, Mooney, Bijan, something. I want to load up on that game, which I think is totally fine. I think is a totally fine approach to this. We got to talk about this because our good friend Todd Pierce in the chat, Trevor Lawrence is active today for the Jacksonville Jaguars. We talked about Joe Mixon, but I think this game's actually pretty appealing overall, like all the way down to the Texans defense. The Jags, if CJ Stroud keeps throwing like a blind man, maybe we need to play the Jags defense. But Nico Collins, yet again, to me, looks very good. We talked about Mixon, but the Jags are free on the other side. Brian Thomas is 5,500. My good buddy Parker Washington is 3,900, and it's been really brutal run out the last couple of weeks. But there's got to be something from the Jags. I think here. I don't know. What do you think about this game? Because theoretically, the Jags should be a place that we can get some cheaper production from, but it's also the Jags with maybe a not healthy Trevor Lawrence.
All right. I am not playing Parker Washington. You cannot make me play Parker Washington. 0.79 yards per route run. You say you can't play him either?
No, I said I can't wait till he scores today.
Oh, yeah. You can tweet at me when he scores. You're not gonna have him either. Yeah, he's just gonna. He's been so.
Well, maybe. I think he's. I genuinely think
doing it.
TJ will play him. All right, good.
I think he's in play. TJ. Is he my favorite? I don't know. I got a couple of crazy ones that TJ also probably has later.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to I think he's just legitimately a bad football player. 0.79 yards per route run this year. He's cheap, sure, but they have Brian Thomas, they have Evan Ingram. They don't need to throw it to Parker Washington with Brian Thomas and Evan Ingram there. So I like both of those. I think Evan Ingram looks great at 4,800. He is probably my favorite or second favorite, maybe behind Taysom. I think Evan Ingram is one of the top tight end plays on the slate. So I think Trevor Lawrence being back only helps there. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is actually very much in play also. He's too cheap for his role. But I think that's it for me for the Jags. I don't think I'm going to any Trevor Lawrence. It's just Evan Ingram, Brian Thomas Jr. That's it for me, I think, from the Jags. The other side of the game I find really intriguing. We talked about Joe Mixon, obviously love Joe Mixon, but I'll take some shots here on CJ Stroud. And I think you said earlier, they're probably just going to continue doing what they've been doing. They have no reason to want to start throwing the ball. But like, what if they? I guess my counterpoint would be like, what if they do want to get CJ Stroud going, like in time for
They need
a
to.
playoff run? Like they need to get CJ Stroud going, and this is like the ideal spot to get CJ Stroud going in a great matchup here.
Yep.
So particularly in lineups without Mixon, I would like to take some shots on CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, and then one of Tank Dell or Dalton Schultz. I think both are fine as the secondary pass catcher there.
Mhm.
So I'll take some shots there. I don't expect it to work out. Like I think most of the time it's going to be a big failure. Other than Nico Collins, I think Nico Collins like as a one-off makes a ton of sense anyway. But like most of the time, I think that passing game is going to fail. But I think that there is within the range of outcomes. They throw for 4 touchdowns and you get just a massive score out of the Texans. So I'm going to play some of that in large field GPPs. And actually, I'm sort of considering, I think I'll have a little bit of John Mechie too, actually, just because we have Xavier Hutchinson out. So I think if you want to throw in one more value receiver, I think John Mechie is pretty interesting in a great matchup. He's cheap. He's actually been pretty good. I think he's been their best, like, wide receiver 3 so far. So given that Xavier Hutchinson is out, give him a little bit of a bump in role there. I think Mechie pretty interesting as far as like off the wall wide receiver plays go. How are you playing the Texans?
I totally agree. I do think I'm glad you said that, because that's kind of how I want to play the value stuff. I think people will play it like, we talk about this a lot, and I used to talk about it with Squirrel all the time, where when people play NFL like NBA, is a lot of slates like this where they just say, okay, I'm going to construct a game stack or whatever, but I use David Moore, or I use Bucky Irving, or I use whatever. It's like, that's my like point per dollar, what play that gets me this other stuff. And like, I get that, but particularly with sketchy value is what I would call David Moore, like sketchy
very
value.
Much.
That's when I like to, all right, let's pivot, but let's build around my new, like John Mechie. It's like, okay, if John Mechie is the pivot off of this guy, what does that mean? Right? It's like, well, if John Mechie's going nuts, probably good for CJ Stroud, maybe good for the passing game, maybe good for that game overall, probably not so good for Mixon. I mean, it's not like you can't play Mixon with that, but it's like something happened here that made this guy the really good like value play instead of this other guy. And like kind of build from there is kind of how I like to do, as opposed to the NBA style building, which is like plug this play in and plug this play in, and then like, okay, maybe I make a pivot or whatever. I really like Mechie as one of those guys in this game for sure. There was another couple of questions. We didn't talk about the Chargers passing game maybe enough, but somebody mentioned DJ Chark is going to play today. I get it. Go swing for it. Swing for anything with I mean, you can't really go wrong swinging on some god awful value. I'll be mentioning some here in a little bit, but I think DJ Chark maybe is one too far for me. But I don't know if you got any of the other non-lad, any QJ. I think QJ might have lost the confidence last week. That was rough. That was really rough last week for QJ. I don't know if I can go back there, but maybe this is the bounce back spot.
I think he's playable. I don't know that I get there on QJ. Like he's 5,000. I guess you could, to play the devil's advocate, maybe they want to get him going. So maybe it's like, all right, you had all these drops. Sometimes they're just like, we really want to prove to you how much confidence we have in you. Like Sean McVay with Kyren Williams. You fumble it 10 times. We're going to go right back to Kyren Williams. Could be the same thing where it's just like, all right, you had all these drops last week. Let's get things right. Let's get your head on straight. So maybe they want to get him involved just to get him feeling confident again. But I probably don't get to anybody outside of Ladd and Will Dissly. I think DJ Chark is just, I played a ton of DJ Chark in best ball last year. He was one of my highest exposed players, and then went off the week after all of my DJ Chark teams were eliminated. So that was fun. But like he can go, like regardless of the role, he had a strong role last year and just never did anything until like week 16 or something like that. So I don't know. It's similar to when we talked about MVS though. When MVS went off, where it was like, what? Just like look at the logic here. Like he's been bad with great quarterbacks in great situations. He's never done anything, and people want to play him suddenly, and then he went off for I don't know a million fantasy points. So it could happen. It's well within the range of outcomes, but I'm not expecting much from DJ Chark. So yeah, it's Ladd and Will Dissly a little bit. 4,000 just has had a really strong role since their bye week. So those are I think the only components of the passing game I'm playing. And
Hayden Hurst was placed on IR. To your point about Will Dissly, they're going to play some like Stone Smart and stuff for a few snaps or whatever. But that's actually like, it's just so disgusting. Gus Edwards and Will Dissly. Why did Harbaugh do this to us? Putting this roster together, like, that's just cruel. One rookie, fun rookie, and a bunch of dudes that we all hate, all on the same team. But to that point, Will Dissly, potentially as like a flex play, we'll get to the tight end that I think you need to be playing in a moment. But Will Dissly at 4,000, right? Kamani Vidal's at 4,000. Like, there's maybe some Chargers. Gus is 4,300. There's maybe some Charger stuff. And say whatever the heck we want about Will Dissly. He runs like a 5.2 40. He's old. He's also probably not very good. They're throwing him the ball, man. They're throwing him the ball. He's going to be out there the whole game. He's scoring touchdowns. Well, 1-2 weeks ago, but without Hayden Hurst, he's like a real fixture of the offense. So I very much so think he's in play. Really quick, just before we get to some more of you guys' questions and talk about some more of these stacks that we like and wide receivers and such, I just want to get this out of the way. Speaking of the tight end thing, I'm playing Taysom Hill. You can't stop me. I'm just doing it. I'm disgusted at myself for having swapped off of Taysom Hill in that game. It was maybe the biggest mistake I've ever. We sat and talked about him for 10 minutes on the show about how good of a play he was, and I played frickin' AJ Barner in my main team for his 2 fantasy points or whatever, watching Taysom go for 50, literally. Like, that sucked. Okay, that was. And so I'm not making that mistake again. Is he going to do what he? No, of course not. He ripped off a 75-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter. It was over. But the role is the most insane thing we've probably ever seen from a fantasy tight end, right? He's not a tight end. He's been lumped there, and this isn't the strongest tight end slate of all time as it is. The 5K is just not right. He's going to throw passes. He had 10 targets. They won the game easily. And he had 10 targets and 7 carries and threw pass. He threw an interception and fumbled, I believe, and scored 50 fantasy points. They also, I believe, the quote from I forget what their interim head coach is. What was God? How did he word it? His role is trending to where we want it to get to. What do you mean trending to? He was the whole offense. Like, there's more. The coach thinks there's more out of Taysom Hill than what we just saw. Like, you just can't get it. You just can't get this role in fantasy, not as a tight end at 5K. So I'm just playing him, and he makes for a great. I think that whole game could be really fun, and he's a huge piece of it.
Interim head coach Darren Rizzi on Taysom Hill's workload. I think our usage with him these last couple of weeks is really what we're kind of trying to trend towards. A little bit of everything, not too much of anything. He's obviously a huge part of what we do. The more he's on the field, the more effective we've been in all the times I've been here. There's that fine line between getting too much and not enough. I think sprinkling him in a little bit everywhere is where we're at our best. He is maybe the highest football IQ I've been around. Offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak said on Taysom Hill, when he's been at his healthiest, we definitely want to use him to the max. When you get into a game, whether it's Taysom or Alvin Kamara or Chris Olave, Foster Moreau, who's got the hot hand that day? I just want to give him the ball. I know, isn't that? I just kind of glossed over that he included Foster Moreau.
Whoever's got the hot hand.
When Foster Moreau has a hot hand, you just got to keep giving him the ball. It's that didn't even cross my mind until you started laughing about it. It's like, why is Foster Moreau in that quote?
That's good.
I think I'm going to have a good amount of Taysom Hill also. I struggle with it more than you do. I think just because of like priors, I'm like, Taysom Hill is 5,000 and everybody wants to play Taysom Hill at 5,000. But you're right. Like the role is just awesome. Since Chris Olave has been out, he's averaging, I wrote this down, 21.8 PPR fantasy points over the past 3 games. So in those 3 games, 17 targets and 16 carries. So like 17 targets is a fine role for a tight end in a 3-week span. Like that's just under 6 targets per game. Like you'll take that typically from your tight end. And then you throw in this, like the same number of carries. And then he's also throwing the ball some, and he like seems to be pretty good. And he's got a fine matchup.
He returned a kick. And it was like he had like a 40-yard kickoff return.
Yeah. Like ultimately, I think hard to argue with it. And he's also like actually not that chalky. Like we're projecting for 18% at RotoGrinders. Like that's
how do you project this role?
You can't project the role.
It's like the Bucky thing that we were talking about before. Is like the history that we have is just like 5K Taysom is ridiculous. But then this is such a unique role. Like how do you project he's probably going to throw 2 passes today? Like if he throws a touchdown, smash.
Right.
If he throws an interception like last week, -1. He's just an impossible projection because we've never seen really a role like what he has.
I will say this: it can fail. Like so, even with all of that said, 2 weeks ago in Atlanta had 2 targets. He caught both of them, 36 yards, and he had 4 carries for 14 yards. Maybe they prepare for him a little bit better now that they saw what he did last week. Like, oh, he's a big part of their game plan. Maybe we should like keep our eye on Taysom Hill a bit. So 2 weeks ago, he did just score 7 fantasy points. If you get 7 fantasy points out of your $5,000 tight end, you're gonna feel like crap. So he to me is not like a stone lock. He looks good. Like 18% is too low for his range of outcomes. He's been really good in 2 of the 3 games without Olave. 16 fantasy points 2 weeks ago. We would obviously take that out of Taysom. And then of course last week just broke the entire slate. Obviously can do that again. I'm not really expecting him to break off a 70-yard touchdown too often. But yeah, I think he looks great. Like the floor is like, I think that 7 fantasy points that he got is probably about the floor for Taysom. And that's baad, but it's not, the end of the world. And it's unlikely. I think it's more likely that he gets to 12 than 7. And then of course could go off for 40 again. So yeah,
he needs a touchdown to be clear. He needs a touchdown, but welcome to the world of fantasy tight ends. There's like who on this Trey McBride can score 20 without catching a touchdown. Like that's about it.
Yep.
Like
Trey McBride is. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree. I just want to hit some more. There's some good stuff. Power mentioned CJ Mosley is out for the Jets, so helps Ken Walker and really any Seattle Seahawk when you remove a good defender. I'm not too worried about the linebacker play. The Ravens played one of their best defensive games without what's-his-face last week, linebacker. But Marshawn Lattimore also officially out. He mentions Nick Westbrook-Akine, which I played on a couple of short slates, and I'm trying not to. I'm trying to. Don't keep going back into the devil's den hoping for Nick Westbrook-Akine touchdowns every single week, but they really have been a little bit better with Will Levis. Calvin Ridley gets a huge target share there. It's not awesome, but I don't think that like super contrarian game stack of like a Levis stack with whatever Terry or B-Rob or something on the other side is too crazy. And I'm just saying that because Donnie brings up a good point of Tony Pollard as a potential pivot, nearly the same price as Chase Brown and a little bit more than Bucky. Tyjae Spears is back and officially active from his concussion. I think that's what's keeping everybody and myself skittish on Tony Pollard, but also don't think it's crazy to say, what if they just kind of keep riding Tony Pollard? What do you think about Pollard as a potential pivot? Are you going to play any of him or any of Tyjae at all?
Yeah, I mean, the role gets better with Tyjae out, but like Pollard is clearly the lead back there. Like it's not a 1A, 1B situation anyway. And it's a great matchup with Washington. So I think Pollard is a pretty strong play. Not like my favorite play on the board. I'm not jamming him into a ton of lineups, but let's see what is the ownership on Pollard. I think is pretty modest.
Probably lower.
7% projected ownership for Tony Pollard. I imagine I'll be overweight to that. Like it's a great matchup at Washington. Spears being back, preferred if he was out, but he would also get a lot more ownership if Spears were out.
He'd be quite popular, I imagine, if Spears were out. Yeah.
So I think it looks great. I think Spears probably brings down the projection a couple fantasy points, just enough to bring down the ownership significantly. And I think he still has massive ceiling. He's been really good this year. He's been their lead back. So I think Pollard is actually a pretty strong play in GPPs.
I am cool with that. Let's hit a couple more questions here. McBride and what do you think about McBride and Hawkinson, specifically for DraftKings tournaments at tight ends, either as pivots? One thing about the Taysom thing is he's such a weird player, and there is really no value on this slate. This question doesn't necessarily align to that, but like if you played Taysom with Will Dissly or something, like as you played the double tight end thing, is very much in play today. If you have a cheaper tight end, so I think we can discuss tight ends and say you can play them as pivots off of Taysom, who's, like you said, also still not projecting that owned, but I think that might be a little light. But nonetheless, you can play Taysom with another tight end or as pivots. What do you think about McBride and Hawkinson, both in that game that we haven't discussed? That's kind of fun and kind of confusing.
Yeah, I think both are strong plays. I think you can play them together. I have no issue. I've never really taken much issue with playing double tight end. I think it's, if they project well enough, why not? Excuse me. Trey McBride, if he could ever just score a receiving touchdown, again, the role is so good.
And he's
all
so
you need
good.
is that receive. He is so good. If he just could score touchdowns from time to time, that would be very helpful. But 5,800, the price tag is, the only real concern with Trey McBride is that we have a lot of pretty good tight end options that are much cheaper. So then 5,800 is tough to pay. But yeah, I think he is a strong play. You can, you don't have to do much to convince me to play some Trey McBride. I think he looks great. TJ Hawkinson, I think, is a really, really strong play, actually. 4,400 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel. Not quite as good, but still a fine price tag. Ran 76.3% of routes last week. Already a focal point of the offense. He's been targeted 24 times in 4 games, even as he's been in some of those games less than 50% route participation. So get him up into that 76%. If he's 80% plus route participation, he could see double-digit targets, and he's only 4,400. And the matchup is fine against the Cardinals. It's not like a standout matchup, but totally fine matchup. So I think Hawkinson looks great. Again, last year, he was $2,000 more expensive, maybe not quite $2,000 more expensive, but he's back to that role, it seems. So I think Hawkinson looks great.
And no Josh Oliver, part of the reason why he jumped up in some utilization metrics is no Josh Oliver, and he is out again today. So I think Hawkinson looks pretty good. What do you think about overall Viking stacks, or I guess on the flip side, Cardinal stacks? Sam Darnold projecting reasonably well, and I don't know if Justin Jefferson is just going to get triple teamed on every play for the rest of eternity and never do anything for fantasy. But I think the Cardinals are a team that can reasonably. We've seen some issues with the Vikings, either them struggling a bit in second halves, or the other team. The defense was really good to start the year, and it's still good, but the other teams, not being able to punch back, and so we kind of got capped ceilings on the Vikings, but theoretically, the Cardinals should be able to punch back today, have a little bit of a clear trio, if you will, of guys to play on the Cardinal side with McBride, Marvin Harrison, and James Conner. And then on the Viking side, right, it's also pretty clear in terms of now we have Hawkinson, JJ Addison, Aaron Jones. What do you think about any of all the collective in this game for tournaments?
Well, first of all, did you see the quote from Jonathan Gannon today about Marvin Harrison? No. We're going to get him going today. The passing game will go through him. So I guess there's one potential downgrade to Trey McBride and upgrade to Marvin Harrison. At least they're claiming that they want to go
through Marvin
Harrison.
If that happens and it works, can that squash all of the coach bullshit in the media of we can't tell who's going to be the starter, we can't tell you about the injuries because this gamesmanship nonsense? Right, yeah. If the coach can come out and say, we're throwing it to that dude, you can't stop me, we're whatever, right, against a good defense, he's we're going to flow through, and it works. Can all these coaches just be stop?
That would be lovely if they just told us what they were actually going to do. Yeah, please. That would be fun. But no, I doubt it. I doubt that that would have any impact on the coaches lying to us all the time. Yeah, I think so. Marvin Harrison, I think, is a dart throw still. I still don't think that you want to prioritize Marvin Harrison based on that quote. But I think he's a totally fine dart throw if you want to believe Jonathan Gannon that they want to go through him. I think Kyler's fine at 6,100. He scored more than 20 fantasy points 5 times over the season, at least 25 fantasy points 3 times. So wide range of outcomes for Kyler Murray, which works well for GPPs. James Conner, fine. We've seen Trey Benson take on a bigger role, but they just paid James Conner. Maybe they do want to ride him
today or yesterday. Yeah. 2-year deal.
Yeah. So and they're still they're fighting for a playoff spot. So I think if they trust James Conner, maybe they just go to him quite a bit. Nobody that I'm super enthusiastic about on the Cardinals, but I think that group is all in play. I'm not going to any Greg Dortch or any real tertiary plays there. On the Vikings, I think Aaron Jones very much in play, has kind of taken back that bell cow type role for the Vikings. He's 6,500. The matchup is pretty good with the Cardinals. So I think Aaron Jones looks good. I will take some shots on Justin Jefferson. Now, I am a Vikings fan. Maybe it's the homer in me, but I think he's the best wide receiver in football. He has not had that spike week yet. I still think it's going to happen at some point. He's going to have that 40 burger. And I'm hoping that it can happen today. And he's 8,100. He's not my favorite pay up at wide receiver even. So that's the one downside is I like a lot of other wide receivers better, but not getting that much ownership. I think Jefferson looks good. I don't think I'm going to play much Jordan Addison, although I didn't last week and it really bit me. Sam Darnold, totally fine, 5,900. Not enthusiastic about it, but I think he's a dart throw in tournaments.
I agree with you. A good shout from Donnie. We didn't get to some more of these tight ends, but Charlie Kolar was put on IR, which shouldn't be something that we're, Josh Oliver and Charlie Kolar. But when pricing is tight and we don't have a lot of good plays, we got to dig to some stuff. Mark Andrews is 3,900 in that big potential, shootout with Baltimore and Philly. That has to be the most fascinating game, like real life, like football game. And of course, kind of in turn from a DFS perspective, because it's kind of good on good and bad on bad. And I don't mean bad like anybody's bad on the team, but the way the teams want to play and the strengths of both teams are kind of colliding, right? Eagles don't want to throw. Like, you can't make us, right?
Yeah, right.
Like Nick Sirianni is the kid who doesn't want to leave his buddy, the 4-year-old who doesn't want to leave the party or whatever, and you got to drag him out kicking and screaming. You can't. I don't care if we have AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. We're not throwing it. We're not doing it. Right. Jalen Hurts has games of 14 pass attempts, but the Ravens' pass defense is their weakness, and theoretically, the Ravens' offense is so good it should push those guys. And like I said, Charlie Kolar out, Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews has also been very game script dependent. And so maybe let's dig into this game super quickly because, if this game does kind of shoot out a little bit and more passing from the Ravens, I do think Mark Andrews looks pretty good at 3,900, but so does Zay Flowers. And we talked about our Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry kind of not being as enthused about them today. And I think that opens up an AJ Brown, Devonta Smith looking questionable at best, maybe more on the side of doubtful. He's going to warm up. And all the reports were there's not any real optimism that he's actually going to be able to give it a go today. So AJ Brown already with a 30% target share in, I believe, every game he has played this year. Now you remove Devonta Smith and you give him the Ravens matchup, and you maybe accelerate the pass game or the pass rate a little bit for the Eagles. AJ Brown feels like a stone cold smash to me, but this game's also got potential shootout written on it. What do you think about really everybody in this one?
Yeah, so you and I are very much on the same page. AJ Brown might be my favorite play on the entire slate, getting just 6% projected ownership. The nut matchup, no Devonta Smith most likely, which that could just increase ownership, which is kind of a bummer. But yeah, AJ Brown is just awesome, and hopefully they do choose to throw some in this game because I think that they should easily be able to get AJ Brown to 100 yards and a touchdown if they just throw a little bit against this defense. So AJ Brown, smash play, like you said. I'll be doing some of the stack with Jalen Hurts also. I think obviously there's a lot of correlation there. It's very expensive, but that's going to bring down the ownership of that stack. And then if you want to do a little salary saving, I think Dallas Goedert very much, he benefits the most, I think, from Devonta Smith being out. So throw Dallas Goedert into the stack and suddenly you have it's not cheap, but it's not quite as expensive if you throw Dallas Goedert in there. I think they look awesome. I love the Eagles passing game. Just those three, though. I'm certainly not going to Jahan Dotson. I'll tell you that. I think those three.
I think we would be remiss if we didn't at least say, all right, and you had a 150 set. If Devonta Smith is confirmed out, we love AJ Brown. I agree. Dallas Goedert is next in that. If I need to play Eagles crappy, because Johnny Wilson's also out. So we would have been probably talking about Johnny Wilson, at least mentioning him. Played a very nice 69% of the snaps last week without Devonta Smith. He's out. So if Devonta Smith is out and Johnny Wilson is out, it's like I still, maybe this is stupid by me, I still don't think they'll just give Dotson. He's so bad.
They've had the scenario. They had AJ Brown and Devonta Smith out and still couldn't get anything to Jahan Dotson. So
I think it's going to be Paris Campbell.
Not Aeneas Smith.
So I just think he's like a gadget. So he was actually a former. He played with Devon Achane. So before Achane fully broke out at Texas A&M, Aeneas Smith and Achane were like a two-headed monster as running backs. Then A&M was like, yeah, this Achane dude, pretty good running back. And Aeneas, why don't you go play wide receiver? Because they had shitty wide receivers. So he turned into a slot wide receiver. He was pretty good, right? Got him into the NFL. But I think he's more of like that slot gadget, like he's little, converted running back. And so, but the problem is the other guy's Britton Covey.
Right.
So I'm like, Britton Covey, also slot receiver, right? So I think it's going to be Paris Campbell on the outside for the Eagles, which doesn't exactly make me want to play Paris Campbell. But I just think maybe you leave some spots open or something like that. I think maybe this is the right way to play it. If you leave some spots open and you're like, oh, we get some word Paris Campbell's going to be the starter or whatever in 2 wide receiver sets, or, oh no, get ready for Britton Covey, right? Britton Covey game. I just think it's not ridiculous to play one of these other Eagles guys. They could be, they're 8 points, could just beat David Moore and just get me AJ Brown and get me Puka and get me Mix, right? Get me the guys that I really want to play on my teams is kind of how I'm thinking about it from those guys. They're not a priority, but I'm looking under every rock basically on this slate because there ain't much out there. So I would be remiss if we didn't at least look under this rock where there's somebody's got to run routes. Somebody's going to be out there. I don't know if they'll catch any passes, but they'll be out there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call out. On the other side of the game, I think Rashad Bateman qualifies there as well. It's just he's fairly cheap. He's not 3,000. I think he's 4,000 or so, and has been their wide receiver too. They seem to like Rashad Bateman, so I think that he is a fine play. Not a priority for me at all, but I think he fits into that bucket of if you want to overturn every stone, we know that he has big play upside. Mark Andrews, like you said, totally playable for me. I think that he is, like you said, game script dependent, but Charlie Kolar being out, I guess, helps a little bit. And they do they like to throw the ball to him in the end zone a little bit, and he's had a couple of big games. So I think Mark Andrews totally in play. Zay Flowers obviously always in play. This is one of those spots where both offenses benefit from the other offense both passing games benefit from the other offense being good. So they're just going to have to throw throughout the game. Whereas, you see all the time with these teams, they just late in the game, they don't have to throw it all because they're up by too much. This could be a shootout. So I think Zay Flowers looks pretty good. I prefer the Eagle side, but I'm going to have a little bit of Lamar, Zay Flowers, maybe Mark Andrews, maybe Rashad Bateman. I think that they look solid.
Yeah, I think I like Andrews just a tick, maybe more than you do, but it's the same thing. It's why I love AJ Brown, is just get into now. If I had $1 for every time I thought both of these teams would be this is the game, we're gonna throw it, right? We're gonna get pushed back on the other side, and then we got 25 Derrick Henry carries and 25 Saquon carries, and the game was 21-17, and we were all let down. But I'm more hopeful, I think, in this one than most games. Best game of the day by a long shot in terms of real football, and I do think both of these teams will take to the air a little bit more. So love AJ Brown, love Mark Andrews, love Zay Flowers, Bateman in play, as you mentioned. But I'm not playing the running backs. I do think Eric in the chat asked favorite player on FanDuel as a flex play 9K or lower. Saquon is not 9K or lower, but I do think it's notable to mention that he's only 9,200 on FanDuel. And that's bad. I believe he was 10,000 last week, and he's 9,200 today after a 40 spot. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I know it's a bad matchup, but I think he's much more in play on FanDuel. What do you think about that question though? Before we kind of give our flag plants and bring crunch time on, so for anybody listening, that does not include Mixon, Chase, Saquon, Nico, those 4 guys. So Derrick Henry, Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, McCaffrey, AJ Brown, Puka, etc. What do you think?
I'm torn between AJ Brown and Puka Nacua. I just said AJ Brown, my favorite play on the slate on DraftKings, or among my favorite plays. He's about the same ownership as Puka on FanDuel, though. At that point, I might just lean into Puka. You're more the targets are more guaranteed for Puka, so I think I'll go with Puka there. How about you?
Yeah, we haven't talked enough. There's a lot to get into on this slate, and we haven't hit all of it. But Puka is right up there. I think the last thing to leave it with before we give our flag plants and bring on crunch time is these kind of spend up wide receivers are awesome. Really, really awesome. I think, however you want to rack and stack them is different. I like the spend up wide receivers a little bit more than the spend up running backs, which is why we're talking about John Dotson and Britton Covey and Paris Campbell and Parker Washington and AD Mitchell. I do think AD Mitchell is the best play. We didn't necessarily get to that one, but Patriots are just a feeding frenzy for opposing teams. I think it's a pretty good spot for him without Josh Downs. So he's probably like my favorite value, if you will, but I want to use those guys to get Puka and get AJ Brown and get Nico Collins and get Justin Jefferson. Somebody in the chat loves Jamar Chase, right? Cooper Kupp, but like you could play like any
Mike
of these
Evans.
awesome Mike Evans, right? We talked about Devontae and Garrett Wilson are like in play. Drake London, we didn't even talk about Atlanta, right? Drake London on the opposite side. There's so many good wide receivers. I want to be getting multiple of those guys into my lineup if I can personally. So that's kind of the last like bow on top from a roster construction perspective to me. So before we bring crunch time in, let's make sure we give our flag plants. If you're new here, what's gonna win tournaments today? It doesn't have to be a hot take. It can be whoever, but what's gonna win, the Millie Maker on DraftKings or the Sunday Million or whatever it is on FanDuel. Can be a player, can be a stack. I'm gonna let you go first.
I want to throw out one more tidbit that a guy from my Discord, Not Fooling Around Crew, I don't know his name, but he goes by Not Fooling Around Crew, threw out the tidbit that Mike Evans needs about 120 receiving yards per game the rest of the year to hit that 1,000 yards to continue the 1,000-yard streak. And I feel like this is a game that if they want to continue that streak, they could just throw for 200 yards to Mike Evans. So he's going to be a big part of my game plan also, because it's against the Panthers. Just a great spot there. So I want to throw out that tidbit, but I think AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts stacks break the slate. That is going to be my biggest stand, probably, is stacking up Brown and Hurts.
I'm going to go with a little bit cheaper stack, but how I'm going to be able to afford AJ Brown and Puka Nacua, Joe Mixon, any of these spend ups that we really like and still get that nice Taysom in there is the aforementioned AD Mitchell, but stacking him with Anthony Richardson. I think a little bit of savings on Anthony Richardson. He's not sneaking by anybody anyway, but again, I don't think his ownership's going to run away with Justin Herbert there and Matthew Stafford there and some of these other guys at quarterback. The dual threat of Anthony Richardson to me at that price in this matchup is elite, and I can get a really, really cheap stacking partner at wide receiver to help afford some of those superstars. So there you go. AJ Brown, it kind of all comes together, whether you play Jalen Hurts or Anthony Richardson, but we love AJ Brown, and let's see who the crunch time folks love today as we bring them in. Had to blow in
the wrong button there. Sorry about that.
The cartridge, take it out and put it back in to see if it starts playing. Yeah. No, fun slate today, guys. I'm excited to get go around the room as we typically do and get some hot takes. We've been on a little bit of a heater, I think, in this segment. It's been there was a down stretch. We hit the lull of the season, and I think I recommended somebody who scored 0 points for like a month. And you guys have been carrying the weight here, but Chief, I got all TJ's takes, I think. So we got to go to Chief first.
I'm gonna switch up my my Grinders Live flag plant, so I don't need to go first. But I'm bringing in a new hotter take for my what's gonna win the middle.
Just so we need even hotter takes from TJ.
I'm not reinventing the wheel here. Jacksonville stinks. Why aren't we playing the Texans? I mean, they pretty much give me the points I need every week. They just let all the wide receivers score 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I mean, Nico Collins, I don't think he's getting enough ownership. We've got it projected pretty mid, I think, around 10, 11%. I will say in my main team, I don't have a single running back above 7K. So that should tell you all you need to know about how I'm approaching this slate. I'm putting all my money into the wide receivers, and I'm expecting them to carry me home today. So, I mean, if I got one flag plan, it's Nico Collins. If I've got a secondary flag plan, it's Gus Edwards. Does not rush for a lot of yards, but he falls in the end zone 3 times.
Oh no, that's the Gus. That is a
well. You know this is going to happen, right? Like everybody's going to be on Ladd McConkey and Herbert, and Gus Edwards is going to have 30 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, and everybody's going to be like, "Oh, you know the GIF where the guy just moving stuff around on his desk." That's how this is going to go by the end of the day. Full disclosure, I do have Gus over 47.5 rushing yards in the prop streets, but I do think he falls into the end zone once. Like, I don't need 20 points from Gus today. Gus gives me 15 and the receivers do their job. I think I got a shot in the end.
It pains me, but I have no pushback on that. Brit, bring some more. Please, no more Gus. But
well, I didn't turn my camera off like last time on Chiefs when you were talking about
at least
the
you didn't leave.
I almost did. I thought about it for a second. But I'm gonna go. I got a running back. Hopefully, this is one of those sub $7,000 running backs. Chiefs talking about. He went back into a full-time role last week after seemed like he was hurt a little bit. We're going Aaron Jones today, boys.
I like it. That's a perfect segue into Kristi with her Vikings.
Yeah.
I like the Vikings today, but what's Kristi? Kristi, what do you got?
Yeah, I do like that a lot. Aaron Jones is a great call. I'm kind of with Chief today too. I'm really on that Houston side. CJ Stroud is one of the quarterbacks that I wrote up today, and we've been, targeting against the Jags all year long. And I think this is a great matchup for he and Nico Collins. So I like that Houston Texans offense quite a bit today.
That I'm excited that you guys all like that because I love Nico Collins. We need Nico Collins and some non-DFS stuff as well. But all that makes me feel is going back to what Chief said about Gus Edwards. Like, you know what's going to happen every time we get excited for like maybe this is CJ Stroud and Nico Collins. Like, get ready for 30 Joe Mixon carries. Get ready to learn Joe Mixon today. TJ, you got your fire take. You got to bring in to close us out. You're on mute.
And of course I'm muted. I'm on the same page as Butthole Jenkins today. I'm playing Mixon. I'm playing Collins, but a Trevor Lawrence game stack with at least 2 pass catchers is winning the Millie today.
Beimfohr, before you guys get out of here, can I give you one deep tournament play?
Yes, please.
That nobody's been playing for the past couple weeks. And I love this stuff. Like, hear me out. Is there anybody hotter in DFS for a cheaper price than MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's just going to catch one 80-yard touchdown pass late and make all our dreams come true? I know it's crazy. There's just not enough pass catchers in New Orleans right now. And 4 targets for him isn't the same as 4 targets for everybody else. His are like 30, 40-yard targets, and he's scoring touchdowns. Variance, I know, but like this team doesn't have a lot of guys to throw it to. If we're going to be loading up on Puka and Cup and that side of the ball, you better have some MVS today.
It's not crazy. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not crazy.
Route participation up 77% route participation in the last game. Coach B call really positive. Yeah, I think he's totally in play.
It makes me feel sick to my stomach that you just talked about Gus Edwards and Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
Yeah, what is going on
here?
here?
Flag plants in the year of our Lord 2024, almost 2025. But I don't think it's crazy. I really don't think it's crazy. I love the Rams, and I obviously like Taysom Hill. And if I can get access to that game, I'm all in. But we got to get out of here. Neil, you got anything else? They inspire anything else from you? Or are we ready to go?
No, I think I'm sick. I got to get out of here after that MVS Gus Edwards talk. Let's just leave.
That's enough. We've already talked about Parker Washington, who Neil loves to needle me about how terrible he is. I think we talked about enough bad players. These guys will get you headed up to lock, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks to them for coming in on that show. Welcome to the final runs here. We're going to call this crunch time for today. We got Will. We got Kristi. Let's jump right into this, guys. Again, not a lot of times if we want to get to some questions. The people are trying to make some important lineup decisions. I'm going to go to quarterbacks. First here, I've got our SimLabs pulled up. And if you're playing cash games, I'll handle some quick discussion on that. I don't know. At least on DraftKings, I'm pretty much in line with all of the highest owned quarterbacks. You're probably looking at one of a Justin Herbert and Anthony Richardson, a Sam Darnold. Stafford's throwing touchdowns. They're not going to Kyron Williams anymore. They're going to the receivers. This is probably the price tier you're looking at on DraftKings for a quarterback today. If you're over on FanDuel, I know Kristi will probably tell you Sam Darnold, 7,200. I think Richardson and Herbert they're a little bit more expensive, but those are probably, again, some of the guys you're going to be looking at along with Stafford. I think Stafford's 7,400 over there. To me, for cash games, you're pretty much choosing between one of those 4 up top here. I think I'm personally going to roll Herbert on DraftKings today. Kristi, I want to get your thoughts on FanDuel a little bit too here today, because I usually like my FanDuel lineup a lot more than my DraftKings lineup. And that is not the case today. FanDuel's pretty tough today. What are your thoughts heading over there? maybe at the quarterback position and in general? What are you doing over there before you start getting in depth on the quarterback position?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things on FanDuel, you're right, pricing is a little bit tighter over there. It looks a little bit different. But I think on FanDuel, one of the differences that I notice is getting exposure to Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts and paying up at the top a little bit too, because just getting exposure to that game has been a really good recipe for success this past year. So I like that a lot. Those are guys that I'm focused on. Looking to save money. Of course, you kind of mentioned Stafford. And he's pretty cheap over there. Sam Darnold's pretty cheap over there. Herbert will obviously carry some ownership, but I think getting, for tournaments, I really like going that Lamar, Jalen Hurts route.
Yeah. And then what about overall at the quarterback position today? Of course, if maybe let's switch to DraftKings. DraftKings is a whole nother story. If you want to stack that game up, I mean, you're looking at not just David Moore, but maybe Adonai Mitchell, maybe a whole bunch of other cheap plays on there. A lot more difficult to get to that game on DraftKings today. How are you handling that over there? And then what's your strategy for DraftKings at the quarterback position?
Yeah, at DraftKings, I'm really not getting there. I'm paying down. I think it just makes sense. Like you said, you're really thin at receiver if you go that route. So I like, the guys at the top too. I do like Stafford out of the cheaper guys. Stafford is probably my favorite. Sam Darnold's right up there too. I do like Herbert, but I'm probably under the field on Herbert for tournaments. I think he makes a ton of sense for cash games. And then I talked a lot about CJ Stroud. I just think, again, against the Jags, I think, both he and Nico Collins make a ton of sense. Tank Dell is cheap on both sites. So I like that route a lot. Those are guys that I'm focusing on. One other one that I'll throw out there is Joe Burrow. I think this is a great game environment too. And you've got T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and then you've got Chase Brown, who all project really, really well. So I think he's kind of a sneaky tournament-owned play for QB this week.
All right, Will, what are you doing at the top here? You look at Herbert, Richardson, Darnold, Stafford, all of them negative, at least in the Sims, in terms of optimal minus projection, except for Stafford, who's coming in the lowest owned of all of those. Is there one you'd like to be on more than the field, one you might be a little bit on less than the field?
For me, it's Darnold this week. Projections coming in really well on him, and I really like. So out of that group, so let me make this clear because you're asking me out of that group. So I want to be clear. Out of that group, it's Sam Darnold because I do really like Justin Jefferson this week quite a bit. So that's my flag play out of that group.
All right. What else are you doing? You mentioned some of your other plays. We had a Gus Edwards. I know TJ was on a Trevor Lawrence stack. CJ Stroud and Nico Collins. Collins receiving line, I think, was around 80 to open the week. It's approaching 90 right now. So it seems like everyone in the world has been hitting Nico Collins overs. Just what are we doing with that? I know Kristi mentioned FanDuel, Lamar, and Hurts a little bit more attainable. What are you doing with them on DraftKings? What's your overall quarterback pool look like?
So in DraftKings, in terms of getting up to the big guns, I'm being honest, man, it was really hard for me to get to some of these 7 and 8K guys this week. So I'm pretty much playing CJ Stroud down. I wasn't able to comfortably get Hurts, and I really want to get Hurts in this week. Just because I felt like this may have been the one game where he was going to get pushed a little bit and might actually have to throw the ball 30 times. I just couldn't get there. And maybe shame on me for not figuring it out by playing some of these other cheaper guys, other cheaper skill position plays. But I just decided I was going Stroud down. So, my main pool is Stroud, it's Cousins, it's Darnold, it's Stafford. It is Justin Herbert, despite the fact that I feel like his ownership may have been out of control. And then on the other side of that New Orleans game, I went and got a little bit of Derek Carr at 5,100.
Yeah, Carr just super low owned. If he hits that deep ball to MVS, to Taysom or Kamara, there's ways. I think I like the Rams to win this game. But if they're pushed and they have to go to the passing game, I think Carr makes a pretty reasonable shot today. I think my favorite tournament plays are I like Anthony Richardson here. A little bit of a down game last game against the Lions. You can't hold that against anybody really with the Lions. Going up against the Patriots here, this is a much different team. I'm looking for Richardson to get in the end zone as a runner. We all like Mitchell as a cheap play. You still got Pittman. Pierce can hit the deep ball. There's ways for him to get there through the air as well. So Richardson. And then the one guy who looks like the SimLabs are liking, no one seems to be on Baker Mayfield. This just seems too easy to play Baker Mayfield in a tournament today. Pair him with Mike Evans, a Bucky Irving, a Rashad White. Pretty simple. Maybe a Cade Otton, although with Evans back and Bucky sort of coming up in the passing game, I'm not sure if Otton's the way I'd want to do it. But definitely Evans with probably Bucky makes a really nice play. And then, of course, you've got everyone's favorite cheap wide receiver. But if you wanted to get different in that game, you could play Hubbard. You could play Leggett. You could play Thielen. And you got yourself what looks like a reasonably low-owned stack with Baker and Evans, and then a lower-owned run back too, as long as you avoid more on the opposite side. So that's a real quick look at quarterback. Let's go to running back. Where Chief, normally, I'll start with you on this one. Normally, we don't see the highest owned running back also simming very well, especially like Alvin Kamara here. Hasn't really had the touchdown luck, but the carries, the receptions, the targets, those are all there. He's not really going to be coming off the field too much, if at all, in this one. How are you handling him at 7,700? I think he's 8,300 on FanDuel. He's pretty attainable there. FanDuel, you're pretty much, you're paying for at least one, if not two, of like the 8,000-ish running backs. And then you're probably going to play Chase Brown as well over on FanDuel. A little bit harder to get the higher priced wide receivers over there because you have to sort of spend up at running back on FanDuel today, in my opinion. But what are you doing with Kamara? Let's settle this. If he's coming in at 30% owned, do you think that's on target? And do you think we should be trying to go over like the Sims are telling us?
Well, I think because of his involvement in the overall game plan, he's getting the carries, like you mentioned, he's getting the targets. At 7,700, he's basically a RB1 wide receiver 2. And really, he's almost like a wide receiver 1, RB1 because of their situation. He's typically getting more targets than anybody else in the offense, and he's getting the running back touches. So at 7,700, I'm in. So I think, even though he's got high ownership, this is a game that, in my opinion, should be back and forth. I don't feel like this should be a game where offenses are going to be stalling out. And even if they stall out in between the 20s a little bit, they still move the ball probably at least 50, 60 yards upfield each time or several times. So I like him quite a bit. I know he's high owned, but maybe I think this is a spot. I think you just match the field here, though. I don't think we got to go overboard. Like 40% is pretty hefty. So I would just try to match the field on him.
All right, can you play Kamara and Taysom Hill in the same tournament team?
I can't, but obviously it's possible. I'm not doing it.
Kristi, real quick, that question.
Yeah, I think you can. I will say I have more exposure to Taysom Hill just because of his price and just because how he's utilized in the game plan. So I think there's a case to go a little bit more overweight on him because we've also seen Kamara be in a smash spot. And he just hasn't gotten the touchdowns there. They've gone to Taysom. They've gone some other routes. You got MBS. So I think you can, but I will say I'm really high on Taysom.
All right, real quick, Cash, you're probably looking at guys like Kamara, Chase Brown, Kristi. I'm going to ask you about Chase Brown in a second here.
Yep.
So Kamara, Chase Brown, Bijan, I think is pretty interesting. On DraftKings, you might need a cheapie. You're probably looking at maybe a Bucky Irving. And I mentioned Aaron Jones. He's not popping on like optimal lineups this week. I just think the projections on basically everywhere are wrong on Aaron Jones. I think he's back into a full bell cow role this week. I like Aaron Jones as probably like a third or fourth option at the running back position. Not as high on the Kyron Williams. That's turned into a passing offense with all the healthy targets. You can get Joe Mixon, but he's the most expensive. Probably not going to go there. Save a couple bucks with some of these other guys. So back to Chase Brown, 6,200. So the ownership's high. I'm struck. This dude is like he's getting the workload of CMC getting last year, right? Between the air and the rush. They had a bye week. So maybe they get some of these other guys they brought in as free agents a touch or two. But literally, Chase Brown's handled every touch for the last 3 weeks. I know it's the Steelers, but I'm trying to understand why the sim is so down. It must be because the projection's low. I'm having a hard time not putting him on almost every lineup today on both sites because he's like the cheapest, no doubt bell cow out there, even in a tough matchup. And if it doesn't come on the ground, it's definitely coming through the air.
I could not agree more. He is one of my favorite plays on the slate. His price is awesome on both sites. I mean, you mentioned a great case. He's just getting all the touches and just an absolute elite play. So I'm having a hard time understanding that portion of it too, because I've pretty much got him, especially, well, really on both sites, but I mean, I've just got him kind of locked in. I mean, he just, to get somebody that has that much exposure in the offense at that price is awesome. I love your Aaron Jones call, because that's one that I wrote down early in the week, especially on DraftKings at just 6,500 sitting
He's
there
on my
in
cash
that
team
Vikings
right
offense.
now.
Yeah.
And I think it's like my decision was him or Bucky Irving. And then there was enough at a receiver where I didn't make the difference. And Bucky, to me, I like Bucky, don't get me wrong, but there's ways he gets 10 to 12 rushes, right? And
exactly.
The passing game work is a little in question sometimes, I think, where I don't think anything's in question for Aaron Jones today. So that's just sort of a thought I had.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I like actually pairing Jones and the Vikings defense. They're coming in as a great play today as well. So I like that a lot. You mentioned Bucky Irving, great price, but you still have Rashid White in that offense. So there's ways that could fail. I do like Joe Mixon a decent amount too. I talked about that Houston offense, and Mixon's just been getting it done. He's expensive, of course, but I do like him. Chuba Hubbard, I think, is a fine play. He's kind of in that mid-tier range. Jonathan Taylor, who is all the way down to 6,900, I think is a super interesting tournament play this week. I think the Colts defense is, especially on DraftKings, is looking like a fairly popular option. So I like pairing those two together. I'm really high on Aaron Jones, Chase Brown. We talked about Alvin Kamara being a very good play, Bucky Irving. I'm with you too on Kyren Williams. I'm way more on Puka this week. It has turned into, just a passing offense, and Stafford and Puka are, probably two of the better plays this week. So a little bit lower on Kyren Williams for me.
All right, Chief. You were mentioning Gus Edwards. He's 4,300. Maybe people missed that at the beginning of the show. I'm going to let you give me 30 seconds on Edwards, and then tell me what else you're doing at running back.
Well, I just think without J.K. Dobbins, he should get all of the work on the ground. Now, I also don't think he's going to have any targets, so I'm not walking into this blind, but I do think he gets 14 to 15 carries today. And it's not like we haven't seen Gus Edwards pop before, and he's 4,300. So it's not like he's 53, 55. Gus is 4,300. I'm willing to roll the dice here. Once again, if he falls into the end zone twice and rushes for 50 yards, guys, that's like 17 fantasy points. That's way more than enough for him to help us, win some tournaments. So it's really more of a price thing. In the dome, games should be high scoring. I think, come on, the receiver falls down to one at least one time. Gus falls in the end zone, and we're all happy. So that's how I feel about Gus. And then in terms of, the running back position overall, I'm not really, I haven't been able to get up to these guys in my main team. I wanted to get some Joe Mixon. I just couldn't make it work in my main team. So, like I told you guys, I'm pretty much 7K and under. Kenneth Walker was my cutoff for my main team. And so I was contemplating Walker. I feel like I'm going to end up on Chase Brown by the time we hit lock and I take her out of this thing, just because his workload is so massive right now. Another situation where do I think the Steelers win this game? Yes. Do I think the Bengals are able to move the ball? Yes. Which means if Chase Brown is anywhere inside the 5, they're going to give him an opportunity to get there. And so I just think it's too much of a workload for him at 6,200. If we told you Kamara was 6,200, we told you Jonathan Taylor who was 6,200, he's getting close. Any of these other big name running backs, Bijan, Kyren, Breece Hall, if we told you those guys were 6,200, we'd be rushing to get them in our lineups. The difference is his name is Chase Brown, and he's an air quoting unproven commodity over the past couple of seasons, but he's got the backfield. I think we need to get him in.
All right. And then Kristi, if you have to, Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley, you got a favorite from that game later?
Yeah, I have Saquon Barkley just because, I mean, he's coming off a huge game. I know the matchup isn't the best, but I mean, Saquon Barkley. And I think at low ownership, I have a ton of interest. So I think he's a great tournament play. But that's my preference between the two.
Yeah, reasonably tough, even on FanDuel, to get to either one of those guys today in your lineups and have you like receivers. And I think all the shows have basically, and I'm in agreement, the high-end wide receivers today just look to be an amazing spot. So I think that's where a lot of the lineup construction is going to go today.
I just finalized my single entry team, by the way.
Yep.
Chase slightly different than I thought, but I do have Chase Brown.
Yeah, I don't understand how you Chase Brown should be the highest owned player of the day in my
absolutely
opinion, by a wide margin. All right, let's go to wide receiver. Chief, I'm going to stick with you first on receiver, mainly because Mr. Carolina Panther, David Moore. What is going on here? This is like his first good game in the history of his career, and we're all going to pile on to him, Chief. What are the vibes in Carolina on him? I mean, he looks like he's going to be out there for a lot of snaps with Coker still out. You know, Leggett, I think, looks like a reasonably good NFL wide receiver. You've got Adam Thielen, the veteran, who's proven to have a good career. Can Moore outproduce them all again, or are we crazy playing him as the highest owned wide receiver of the day?
I think it's crazy for what it's worth. We've seen Adam Thielen kind of be the guy in this offense at receiver, especially pretty much all of last season. I mean, Adam Thielen was getting 10 targets a game, and he just happened to get hurt this year. I think the one thing that I will say is he's 3,500, and even if he doesn't get 10 targets, he's probably getting 6. Like, his target share isn't about to just completely fall off of a cliff. So I'm fine with David Moore. He's cheap enough, but I would throw some caution to the wind. I don't think we need to be looking for 20-point games. But once again, when I'm playing a guy for 3,500, if he gets me 12 fantasy points, I'm fine with that in the end, especially as long as the other guys produce. So straight up, I don't like him better than Thielen or Leggett, but also straight up at 3,500, I'm fine. I just don't like the ownership. That ownership
this would be the absolute fade if I was, from the Millionaire Maker articles, like the highest owned, crappy, low priced wide receiver. This is the Sims would agree with me on this one. So I don't like Moore. Adonai Mitchell straight up over him at half the ownership. That seems pretty reasonable to me. There's a couple other, there's pick your favorite Patriots wide receiver. You got TJ's Parker Washington down there too. You can mess around with him. I don't know if I think I'd play a few other guys over him, but there's ways to get different. We're just searching for that because that's what allows you. This makes your lineup today. You need this cheap-ish wide receiver generally to get it done today. So I wanted to get Will's thoughts on that. Will, I'm going to stick with you too here. Anything else on these high, Let's make a cutoff of Cooper Kupp and above here on my screen. You got a favorite of some of these high-owned guys today?
Oh man, can it be Drake London, who's right below? No, because you told me
you can break the rules. You can break them.
You told me it was, but Drake London is probably my favorite out of that group of people that are a little bit higher owned. I like him at 6,500. Obviously, we know this has been one of Kirk's favorite targets, a guy that, we've seen him get 10, 11, 12 targets most games, probably comes in at a floor of 7 targets, I would say, with upside for 15. I don't think he quite hits 15 today, but I definitely think 10 to 12 is in the cards. Coming back from injury, coming off bye week, I expect him to play really well. So he would be my favorite. My second favorite out of that group, though, I mean, God, it's got to be Puka Nacua, right? Yeah, I know it's showing negative leverage, but I don't believe all negative leverage parts aren't created equal. And this guy's got the target share to prove it. They're probably going to throw to him 12 times in this game with upside for 18 times. That's not an exaggeration. He can legit get 15 to 18 targets in this game. While it's saying no, we're saying yeah. Hopefully you guys know that song. Love Puka Nacua today for sure.
All right, real quick, cash games. What you're looking at? You're probably looking your cheap wide receiver. You're looking at David Moore or probably Adonai Mitchell on DraftKings for a cheap play. I don't think you really need either of those cheapies on FanDuel. Mid-tier is reasonably strong. You've got guys like Brian Thomas is probably my favorite. You've got Calvin Ridley as well. On your higher end, you've got guys like a Puka Nacua. You've got an AJ Brown. I'm a little bit more down on T. Higgins. I would prefer Jamar Chase very clearly in that game if I was trying to get one. So Higgins would be someone I would be underweight on. It looks like the Sims also agree with me on that. And then I'm not on McConkey on DraftKings, but the price on FanDuel is just a little bit too tough to ignore. It's $6,300. Don't love his the schematic matchup over there in the slot, but I don't know. I think I'm on the opposite end of Will's take here. I think they let Justin Herbert air it out in this game. He's good instead of trying to let Gus Edwards and a couple of these other running backs try to get it. I think they put it in Herbert's hands, and if they do that, and he has a spike week, of course McConkey's going to come along with that one. So I understand that. I don't think I'd play McConkey in like a naked GPP. I pretty much would only play him with Herbert, if that makes sense. Kristi, what are your favorite wide receivers up at the top? And then let's dice up a couple of lower owned ones for the people.
Yeah, I do like Puka a lot. That, like you mentioned, we talked a little bit earlier on, there's a lot of high-end receivers that really look great this week, and Puka is definitely one of them. And I'm going to throw this in more. I'm playing him more so on FanDuel, but Justin Jefferson, who really has struggled, and I know I've been on him quite a bit, but I like this matchup for him. And I actually like getting exposure to both he and Marvin Harrison today. Marvin Harrison's price has come down. I think he's a really good tournament play. He's only $6,000 on DraftKings. And, you know, we heard a little bit of the coach speak before earlier today, talking about how they really want to get the ball in Marvin's hands today. And, you know, I could see him having more of a ceiling type game.
I never want to hear coach speak again if Marvin Harrison gets like 5 targets today. So
exactly.
We'll be done with Arizona.
Yeah.
We can cross Arizona coach speak off if it doesn't happen today.
Exactly. And you know what? Honestly, I was on Marvin before any of that. I really was, just because I always look for guys like that have the upside. Yes, he's been very boom or bust, but he has the potential to break out a little bit too. So I think he's interesting. Calvin Ridley is a really good price over on DraftKings at just $5,700. I like that a lot. Brian Thomas too is very cheap. You know, we talked a lot about that Houston game. I think he makes a great bring back option. So he's someone that I'm definitely interested in. Mike Evans, you kind of talked about him. It's he and T. Higgins really at the top. And I think Mike Evans, I definitely have the preference there for tournaments. I just think he's a great option. That Baker really isn't carrying much ownership, but I do think Evans at 6,700 is a fantastic play. Like that quite a bit. Tank Dell, his price has come down really on both sites too. He's only 6,400 over on FanDuel, so really interesting play over there. On FanDuel, I'd also say with the night game, you've got exposure to like Khalil Shakir and Juwan Jennings, who I think are really great plays over there, and it gets you exposure to that night game, kind of more of a last type piece. But yeah, there's a lot of great plays at the top. AJ Brown, I think, is phenomenal, and over on FanDuel, he's got to be one of the top plays over there. It's a little bit harder to get to those guys, especially if you're trying to get to Jalen Hurts over on DraftKings, like we mentioned, but I think he's a fantastic tournament play as well.
Yeah, Will, I've got sorted by optimal minus projection. You know, if you're looking for leverage plays in tournaments, any one of these guys, McConkey is someone I would straight up flip this around. I would put him at negative. Me and the Sims don't agree on this one particularly. That's hey, not everyone has the same take projections in people. Is there anyone here you would really, I think to me of the players I'd like to play, of course, AJ Brown, but again, it's just a difficult, you can get to one high-end wide receiver on DraftKings reasonably easily, but just the 700 from Puka to AJ Brown, it really constricts what you do with the rest of your lineup. That's why his ownership's coming in too low. But anyway, Will, anyone here standing out to you? I think probably Zay Flowers and AJ Brown would be the two I'd have interest in.
For me, it's actually Cooper Kupp. Like, everybody wants Puka Nacua, but I mean, look, Cooper Kupp was the Puka Nacua before this train got rolling. Mm-hmm. And in fact, you may be able to double stack these guys today. So I'm not ready to write off Cooper Kupp, who has seen his fair share of 12 to 15 target games also. So While, because here's the thing, both of these guys can get there. I think Puka gets there with a lot of the bigger plays, and Cooper Kupp is going to get there on volume. And we've seen them run these rub routes for Cooper Kupp around the end zone and just get him touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. Puka could have 8 catches for 120 and no touchdowns, which is still going to be great. And Cooper Kupp could have 8 catches for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he gets there. So I think we're overlooking Cooper Kupp a little too much.
All right. Kristi, tight ends. We Taysom Hill, I'm in agreement. See someone I'm on DraftKings for sure. I'm playing him on my cash team. FanDuel at 7,000, a little bit different. I think Evan Ingram on FanDuel makes a lot of sense. I'm expecting Evan Ingram and Brian Thomas to just absolutely feast today. Those are 2 guys. Brian Thomas is one of my favorite wide receivers of the day. Same with Evan Ingram at the tight end position. You've got Hawkinson uptick in snaps with no Josh Oliver. I had his bet at 40 yards on Scores and Odds when I posted it, and I think his prop's pushing 50 as it stands right now. So that looks like some good CLV. I think he's pretty interesting. Goddard, I understand Goddard, but I think I would just try to. It's AJ Brown's game this week. So I'm on AJ Brown if you can get him, but I understand why you would go to Goddard. And I just think a lot of these other guys down the tier in ownership are, I don't know, you're getting fancy. And, is Zach Ertz going to catch a touchdown every week? No. McBride, he's definitely not going to catch a touchdown the entire season. So like you got, there's just a lot of things here. I'd be pretty happy to just play basically the top 3 or 4 guys here. And I normally want the $3,000 tight end, but today I have no problem paying in the mid tier.
I agree. Taysom Hill is my favorite, and I pretty much have him in most of my lineups on DraftKings, and I even have him on FanDuel too, just because there's just so many unique ways to utilize him. TJ Hawkinson, I actually have a couple of builds that I really like over on DraftKings that have both Hill and Hawkinson. I think they're both great. They're both great prices.
I think,
like you said, you're probably
the optimizers. I think even. Don't quote me, but I think both the Blitz and the RotoGrinders projections were pushing 2 tight ends. Don't quote me on that. It might have been earlier in the day, but I understand that. I'm definitely not doing that, though.
Yeah. I just like it just because I like both those guys a lot, and I want exposure to both, and I like that Minnesota Vikings game too. One other guy I'd throw out there, and I'm using him a little bit over on FanDuel too, where I'm getting more exposure to the Philly Baltimore game. But Mark Andrews at 3,900, I think, is a fine tournament play. He's 5,600, I think, over on FanDuel. But we've seen him getting targeted, get a touchdown. I think there's ways where we can see that, play out really well for tournaments. So I would just mention him. But other than that, very heavy on Hill, Hawkinson, Evan Ingram, like you mentioned.
All right, Chief, real quick, tight end. What are you looking at today?
How much is too much TJ Hawkinson? 100%? I'm just kidding.
That's probably too much, but I get
it. I'm definitely loading up on Hawkinson today, especially since I like Darnold. I feel like I'm lower on Taysom Hill than everyone else, and that's probably a mistake. But I get it, man. He's just doing too many things. Go gadget Taysom. That's what they're doing with him right now. I'm fine with Evan Ingram. Maybe I'm still a sucker for Kyle Pitts, but I think this game may, bring him into a couple big plays. And then, last but not least, I would say Dallas Goedert. If Devontae Smith is out, I'm going to be way more interested in Dallas Goedert late. So if you've got some room to kind of swap or, something like that, I definitely think he's a good play. And then this has been positive in terms of the touchdown equity, but the targets have still been there. Zach Ertz, 3,800, really cheap. And he's, like I said, the targets have been there. So I don't mind him if you really need to get cheap and love the call on Mark Andrews, obviously. I think someone in the chat had mentioned, over the past few weeks, he's been, 14, 15 fantasy points or more in several games. If you go back to last, eight games or so, I think it's, 6 out of 8, 5 out of 8. But he's done really well, and the game script should lead him to some targets today, as long as both of these teams don't go ground and pound.
If you're looking for any bets, real quick, I'm on the Colts, I believe, in the early slate. I like if you can go to FanDuel and look up the alt lines for Christian McCaffrey. You can get his 25 plus yards at a price that really shouldn't be available. I don't know if it's still there, but he's hit 25 plus receiving yards in 15 of his last 16 games, and it should be around a minus 150 to minus 160. Seems absurd that they're able to get. Oh, you're on mute, Will.
Sorry, I was telling my daughter I'm live on the show. She's at my office door right now.
I thought this was the Will's on mute part of the show.
She's trying to get my attention, and I'm telling like, hey, I'm live on the show. So,
all right, let's get some QQs. We're not going to have a ton of time, but we will see what we can get here for first. I'm just going to start with the latest and work my way backwards here. Mr. Richard, DraftKings running back for the Millie Maker, Aaron Jones, Chuba, or Tony Pollard. I'm firmly on Aaron Jones. Chuba would be second.
Yep.
Kristi, would you agree?
I totally agree. Yep, Aaron Jones, great play for the Millie
All
contest.
right, Bucky Irving or Lad McConkey. We got to pick one straight up, Will.
Irving, if you're not stacking that game. If you're stacking that game, it's obviously Lad McConkey.
All right. Let's see. That's a 3 for FanDuel. This is from Kevin. Sam Darnold, Nakua, and Brian Thomas, or Herbert, A.J. Brown, and Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce just a little bit too risky. I would definitely go number one. Looks like my cash team, I think, on FanDuel. So I think that one looks pretty good to me. Dave wants to know FanDuel cash Jones and Ingram. So that's Aaron Jones and Evan Ingram, or Bijan and Hunter Henry. I think I would lean strongly to the first one. As much as I like Bijan Robinson today, he's another guy who I expect to get like 85% of the workload today.
Yep.
I think I think Evan Ingram's in store for a pretty big game here. McConkey, we got that one. Let's see here. Matt wants to know AJ Brown, Aaron Jones, and Adonai Mitchell, or Puka, Kamara, and more. So it's basically AJ Brown and Aaron Jones, or Puka and Kamara. I mean, Puka, Kamara, and more for sure for DraftKings cash. That's what everybody's
absolutely. Yep.
Let's see what else we can get here. Pick a defense today. Yeah, there are no good defenses. I'm fine with the Cardinals on DraftKings at 2,400. I think the Colts are pretty popular at 2,800. There's really no defense that's really standing out.
When in doubt, take Minnesota and Pittsburgh. They're going to get sacks no matter what.
Yeah, I think those are. There's not the high owned defense that's cheap that everybody wants to play today.
Yep.
Let's see. Those were a couple more questions. Let me see if I can find any more. Kamani Vidal, you're on Gus Edwards. Will, what's your thoughts on his usage today?
I don't mind that as a pivot. I mean, Gus isn't getting a lot of ownership. Vidal obviously could be catching some passes. Don't hate that one bit.
Nakua or AJ Brown on FanDuel, Kristi?
I'd probably go. Oh boy, I'd probably go Nakua, but I like both of them a lot.
Yeah. So in a vacuum, Puka is going to be the better projection. But like if you 120 yards and 2 touchdowns is much more in the range of AJ Brown. So I think there's a little more upside with AJ Brown personally than Nakua. Yep. Nakua very few pass to failure in my opinion in this game, but maybe not as much complete upside. Keith wants to know FanDuel single entry. He's got Drake London and Kamara, or Gus Edwards and Nico. Kristi, I'll throw that to you.
I think I'd go Edwards and Nico.
Oh, wow. Thought for sure it was London and Kamara. And you think Nico 152 is like, that's a Nico Collins game here, right?
I do. And I think Edwards could easily luck into a couple of touchdowns that Will talked about earlier. And I like Kamara, but there's ways for him to fail.
All right, let's see. It looks like we got most of the questions that I've seen here. Chief, Brendan one. DraftKings cash, Kamara, Evans, and Hawkinson, or Bucky, Puka, and Taysom Hill?
I'm probably going number one, but I get it.
So we get our number one running back in the first one, Kristi, with Kamara, or we get our number one wide receiver and tight end in the second one. So Kamara, Evans, and Hawkinson, or Bucky, Puka, and Taysom?
I think I like the second one just a little bit better, but they're both good. They're both good.
Man, it's tough. It's tough not to play the Puka Taysom, but it's also.
I just like Taysom a lot. And Puka.
All right. We're like a minute out here. I'm going to see if I have, let me bring up scores and odds real quick and see if I have any late game bets. Chief, you got any props from the late games people can get into? Or, I mean, they can bet these things live. Anything you're truly strong on today?
Let's see. Let me see my late game stuff because I was super strong on Justin Jefferson over receiving yards today. So I'm hopping in my app right now, Britt, like just so I can make sure I'm accurate. I know we've hit lock and it's loading up. So sorry.
Let me see what I got for the people. Lamar rushing yards on FanDuel. If you can get that 41.5, scores and odds are showing that being pretty good right now. I like that one. This is like the Mahomes, Josh Allen, when you take their rushing yards is after a few down weeks, which is what Lamar's had against a top tier opponent. And that's what's exactly happening today with the Eagles. So Lamar rushing yards looks like 41.5 on FanDuel. That's from the late games. Real quick, just trying to see if I got anything else here from the late games. AJ Brown touchdown. You can still get it at a pretty good price. Taysom Hill touchdown.
Puka's receiving yards and Mike Evans receiving yards overs. I took Kamara over 15.5 rushing attempts and yards. Let me see. Yeah, those are my main ones. I took Chuba Hubbard over rushing yards also. He's just getting so much volume right now, so took him as well.
All right. I think that's going to about do it for this week. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Hopefully you watch from 9:30 on. If you have been, or even if you just tuned in, click the like button on your way out. Subscribe if you want to get notifications from all the shows here on RotoGrinders. We would appreciate it. And other than that, I hope Will and Kristi have a good day. I'm Britt. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we out.